Hi everyone, welcome back to Red Umbrella. I hope you are all doing well. Today we are going to be looking at 10 facts for every major Family Guy character. From the details you probably missed, to the running jokes that quietly shaped who these characters became over the years. We will be breaking down not just what makes each character memorable, but why they work, how they evolved, and what separates them from the rest of the cast. Before we get started, I would really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel. It is completely free, and it helps Red Umbrella keep making longer, more detailed videos like this for the community we are building here. Alright, that is enough from me. Let us get into it. First up, Peter has canonically caused multiple mass casualty events throughout the series. These include collapsing buildings, plane crashes, and large-scale explosions. And in most cases, he shows little to no remorse afterward. Peter Griffin has killed hundreds, maybe thousands of people throughout the show. His actions have destroyed buildings, caused planes to crash, and created explosions that wiped out entire city blocks. The show treats these deaths like background noise. Peter walks away from burning wreckage and collapsed structures without a second thought. The pattern started early and never stopped. In the episode called Airport 07, which aired in 2007, Peter became obsessed with acting like a redneck after watching a comedy special. He bought a pickup truck and painted anti-abortion messages on the back window. The paint covered the entire rear window. Peter could not see anything behind him when he reversed. He backed straight into his neighbor Quagmire's car and destroyed it completely. This was just the beginning of Peter's destructive behavior in that episode. He had to drive Quagmire to the airport because Quagmire's car was totaled. While they were at the airport, Peter noticed fuel tanks used for airplanes. He got an idea in his head. Peter thought that if he put airplane fuel in his pickup truck, the truck would be able to fly. This makes no sense. Cars cannot fly just because you put different fuel in them. But Peter did it anyway. Peter stole the fuel from Quagmire's airplane. The airplane was scheduled to fly from Quahog to Atlanta with passengers on board. Quagmire was the pilot for this flight. The plane took off without anyone realizing the fuel tank was empty. Halfway through the flight, the plane ran out of fuel. The engine stopped working. The plane went into freefall and crashed. Mayor West was reading to children at a school when someone told him about the plane crash. He ignored the news and kept reading the book. This was a direct reference to how President George W. Bush reacted when he was told about the September 11th attacks. The show made this comparison openly. The news station showed different scenarios of how bad the crash could have been. In one scenario, the plane crashed into a school full of rabbits. The rabbits caught on fire and ran around screaming. In another scenario, a man survived the crash but was so angry that he went home and beat his wife multiple times. The number of people who died in that plane crash was never stated clearly, but commercial airplanes carry dozens of passengers plus crew members. Quagmire lost his job as a pilot because of the crash. Peter caused this plane crash because he wanted to make his truck fly. He showed no remorse. The show never mentioned the victims again. A few years later, in the 2013 episode called Big Fat, Peter caused another plane crash. Quagmire had acquired a private luxury plane. He invited Peter, Joe, and Cleveland to go on a trip to Canada with him. They were supposed to tell their wives they were going to strip clubs, but they lied and said they were going somewhere else. On the plane, Peter decided to recreate a scene from a Twilight Zone episode called Nightmare at 20,000 feet. In that episode, a passenger sees something on the wing of the plane. Peter opened the emergency door while the plane was flying at high altitude. Opening a door on a plane that is in the air creates massive pressure changes. The cabin depressurizes instantly. Objects and people get sucked out of the plane. This is exactly what happened. The plane lost control and crashed in the Canadian wilderness. All the passengers survived this particular crash, but that was pure luck. Peter broke Quagmire's legs during the crash by setting animal traps. The show treated this like a joke. Peter wandered off into the woods and became feral for 2 months. He forgot how to speak and acted like an animal. The crash happened because Peter wanted to recreate a TV show scene for fun. The deaths Peter causes are not limited to plane crashes. In the Cleveland Show episode Gone with the Wind, which aired in 2010, Peter killed Loretta Brown. Loretta was Cleveland's ex-wife. She lived in Cleveland's old house in Quahog after Cleveland moved away. Peter was using a giant crane to move a complete brontosaurus skeleton. He wanted to put the skeleton in his bedroom. This required operating a massive piece of construction equipment to lift a multi-ton dinosaur skeleton over residential homes. Peter was almost finished when his watch alarm went off. The alarm reminded him that it was time to watch a TV show called United States of Terra. Peter immediately stopped working. He threw his hard hat off. The hard hat landed in the crane's control levers. This caused the machine to lose control. The crane catapulted the entire brontosaurus skeleton through the air. The skeleton crashed directly into Loretta's house. The house was a normal 2-story residential home. A brontosaurus skeleton is enormous and weighs several tons. When it hit the house, the building collapsed. Loretta was taking a bath on the 2nd floor at the time. The bathtub fell from the 2nd story to the ground. In the show's running gag, Cleveland would usually be in the bathtub when his house got destroyed. He would slide out the bathroom window, still in the tub, and yell "no" repeatedly. This time it was Loretta. The bathtub hit the ground hard. Loretta broke her neck from the impact and died. Peter walked away without acknowledging what he had done. The show mentioned that 475 people attended Loretta's funeral, but Peter was not shown expressing any guilt or facing any consequences. He had killed someone because he wanted to watch a TV show and left construction equipment unattended. Peter also owns multiple aircraft that he crashes regularly. In the episode The Cleveland-Loretta Quagmire from 2005, Peter owns something called the Hinden Peter. This was a personal blimp with Peter's face on the front. The name referenced the Hindenburg disaster, where a German Zeppelin caught fire and exploded in 1937, killing 36 people. Peter naming his blimp after a famous disaster was supposed to be funny. Peter ran out of his house yelling to the Hinden Peter. The blimp flew past the window. Then there was a massive explosion. The explosion happened at Joe Swanson's house. Joe yelled, "Oh my God!" when he saw the explosion. Peter apologized to Joe and said he was sorry, but Peter had already caused the explosion. Joe's house was damaged or destroyed. The show did not explain if anyone was inside Joe's house when the blimp exploded. Joe has a wife named Bonnie and a baby daughter named Susie. They could have been inside. Joe asked Peter how he could afford all these vehicles. Peter owned the Petercopter, which was a helicopter with Peter's face on it. He owned the Hinden Peter blimp. Later, he owned other vehicles, like the Peter Dactyl. Peter has a normal job at a brewery. He should not be able to afford personal aircraft. In a later episode, called Meg Stinks from 2014, Peter explained how he pays for everything. He robs banks. Peter walked into a bank with Meg and told her they needed to kill anyone who moved. Meg protested. Peter said they were buying a zebra next week. This implies that Peter commits armed robbery regularly to fund his ridiculous purchases. The most deadly incident Peter caused was in the 2016 episode called Hot Shots. Peter and Lois became anti-vaccine activists. They read false information online claiming that vaccines cause autism. This has been proven false by medical science countless times. But Peter and Lois believed it anyway. They refused to vaccinate their baby son Stewie. Then they started a campaign to convince other parents in Quahog not to vaccinate their children either. The campaign worked. Parents across Quahog stopped vaccinating their kids. Children at Stewie's preschool all came down with measles. The disease spread through the entire town. It became an epidemic. The government put Quahog under quarantine. Nobody could enter or leave the city. Brian pointed out that Lois's campaign had caused this. Lois finally realized she was wrong. She decided she wanted to vaccinate Stewie after all. But Peter had already destroyed every vaccine in the town. The show cut to a scene of Peter dressed as the Joker from The Dark Knight. He walked away from a hospital while it exploded behind him. The entire building blew up. Hospitals are full of people. There are patients in beds, doctors, nurses, staff members, and visitors. Peter destroyed the entire building with everyone inside. After the explosion, Peter mentioned he needed to go home and overdose in his apartment. This was a reference to how actor Heath Ledger died. The show made a joke about a real person's death while showing Peter blowing up a building full of sick people. At the end of the episode, Lois said she was happy that Stewie was healthy and only 475 people died. She seemed relieved because none of the dead people were anyone she knew personally. The show confirmed that 475 people died because of Peter's actions. Peter caused an epidemic and then destroyed the only cure. Peter also regularly fights with a giant chicken named Ernie. These fights have occurred multiple times across different episodes. The first fight started because Ernie gave Peter an expired coupon at a grocery store. This is the most minor possible complaint. Peter decided the appropriate response was violence. Every fight between Peter and Ernie follows the same pattern. They punch each other through buildings. They crash through windows and walls. They fight on top of moving vehicles. They destroy subway trains, construction sites, and theme parks. The fights go on for several minutes of screen time. Buildings collapse. Cars explode. The chicken fights feature what the show calls heavy casualties to bystanders. In one fight, they destroyed a subway train while it was full of passengers. In another fight, they crashed through a Ferris wheel while people were riding it. The rides collapsed. People fell from great heights. In another fight, they destroyed an entire building. The building came down while they were fighting inside it. Concrete and steel beams crashed into the street below. The show established that innocent bystanders die during these fights. The bystanders are just background characters who happen to be in the wrong place when Peter decides to fight a chicken. One fight took place across multiple locations. Peter and Ernie started fighting at the Griffin house. They smashed through the windows and walls. Then they fought in the sewers. A crocodile tried to attack them. They killed the crocodile, and Ernie used its body as a weapon. They fought on a subway train until it derailed. They fought at a construction site. They fought on an airplane. They fought on a Ferris wheel at an amusement park. Each location was destroyed. The show played this for comedy. In the episode No Chris Left Behind from 2007, Peter and Ernie had dinner together with Ernie's wife Nicole. They tried to resolve their differences. They realized their fighting was pointless. Then they argued about who would pay the restaurant bill. This started another fight. Peter hit Ernie in the head with a frying pan until his skull cracked. The fight resumed in its usual pattern of massive destruction. Peter never faces legal consequences for any of this. He does not get arrested for causing plane crashes or blowing up hospitals. He does not pay for the property damage. He does not attend funerals or acknowledge the victims. In one episode, Peter mentioned he was raped in federal prison after being arrested for hijacking a plane, but this was played as a joke and happened off-screen. It did not seem to connect to any specific crime Peter actually committed on screen. The show presents all of this death and destruction as comedy. Peter causes disasters because he is impulsive and stupid. He steals airplane fuel because he thinks it will make his truck fly. He opens plane doors mid-flight to recreate TV shows. He abandons construction equipment to watch television. He blows up hospitals to destroy vaccines. He fights a chicken over an expired coupon. Each action kills people. The deaths are mentioned briefly or shown in the background. Then the show moves on to the next joke. What makes this disturbing is not just the body count. It is Peter's complete lack of remorse. After causing these disasters, Peter goes back to his normal life. He drinks beer with his friends. He watches TV. He argues with his family. The dead people are never mentioned again. They do not have names or faces. They are just numbers. 475 dead from the vaccine crisis. An unknown number dead in plane crashes. An unknown number crushed in building collapses. Heavy casualties from chicken fights. The show has confirmed that thousands of deaths get mentioned across different seasons. Some tallies count over 3,000 deaths in a single season. This includes mass casualty events like hurricanes and terrorist attacks that the show references. It includes background characters who die in cutaway gags. It includes named characters who get killed and stay dead. The show treats death casually. Characters die constantly. Most of them are forgotten immediately. Peter Griffin is the main character. The show is named Family Guy, but Peter has caused more death and destruction than most villains in other shows. He has hijacked planes. He has caused multiple plane crashes. He has destroyed a hospital. He has collapsed buildings onto occupied houses. He has caused an epidemic that killed hundreds. He has destroyed trains, theme parks, and city blocks during his fights. All of this happens because Peter is selfish, impulsive, and does not think about consequences. The show never presents Peter as evil. He is just stupid and reckless. But the results are the same. People die. Buildings explode. Cities burn. Peter walks away. He apologizes sometimes, but nothing changes. He keeps causing disasters. The show keeps playing it for laughs. The victims stay dead. Their families are never shown. The funerals happen off-screen, if they happen at all. Peter moves on to the next episode. The body count keeps rising. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, Peter has openly admitted to abusing alcohol, drugs, and even steroids to such an extreme degree that doctors explicitly state he should not be alive. Yet the show consistently treats this as completely normal. Peter has admitted to abusing alcohol, drugs, and steroids to the point where doctors explicitly state he should not be alive. Yet the show treats this as normal. Peter Griffin drinks alcohol constantly. Every single episode shows him at a bar called the Drunken Clam with his friends. He drinks beer at home, he drinks beer at work, he drinks beer in his car. The show has confirmed that Peter is an alcoholic. This is not a secret or a theory. Multiple episodes directly state that Peter has a drinking problem. In the 2011 episode called Friends of Peter G., Peter and his dog Brian cause a disturbance at a movie theater because they are drunk and talking loudly during the film. The police force them to attend Alcoholics Anonymous meetings for 30 days. At the first AA meeting, people share their stories about how alcohol ruined their lives. One man named Greg talks about how he drove drunk and killed an 8-year-old girl. Peter interrupts him to ask what kind of car he was driving. Greg says it was a Miata. Peter makes fun of him for driving a Miata and says it does not count as a real sports car. Peter does not take AA seriously at all. Instead of learning from the meetings, he brings cases of beer to the next session. He convinces everyone in the group to start drinking again. The people who are trying to get sober all relapse because of Peter. When the police show up to investigate a noise complaint, Peter leads the entire group in a huge musical number pretending to be a church choir. This tricks the police into leaving. The song is called Mr. Booze, and it goes on for several minutes. Everyone is celebrating alcohol while pretending to be religious. After the meeting ends, Peter drives home while drunk. He falls asleep at the wheel. His car crashes into a tree, and he dies instantly. Death appears and pulls Peter's soul out of his dead body. Death decides to give Peter a second chance, but first he shows Peter what will happen if he keeps drinking the way he does. The future vision shows Peter as a complete monster. He is drunk all the time, his house is filthy, he burns his family with cigars for fun. Stewie actually enjoys being burned, which the show plays as a dark joke. Peter is having sex with his boss Angela at work while completely intoxicated. His entire family is terrified of him. This is what Peter's life will become if he does not change his drinking habits. Peter says he wishes he had never touched alcohol at all. Death shows him an alternate reality where Peter never drank. In this version, Peter is cheerful and clean-cut. He drinks milk instead of beer. He has different friends who are polite and wear nice clothes. He does not know Joe or Quagmire because they still drink beer and he avoids them. His voice is different, his entire personality is different. Peter hates this version of himself too. Death explains that Peter does not need to quit drinking completely. He just needs to drink in moderation. Peter agrees to try. Death brings him back to life. From that point forward, whenever Peter buys a 6-pack of beer, he takes 3 cans and throws them in the garbage. This is supposed to show that he is drinking responsibly now. The episode ends at a landfill where seagulls are getting drunk from all the beer Peter threw away. The show treats this as a happy ending. Peter learned his lesson. He will drink less beer. But the episode never mentions that Peter died from drunk driving. He did not face any legal consequences. He did not hurt anyone else in the crash. He just came back to life and promised to throw away half his beer. The families of drunk driving victims are never mentioned. The 8-year-old girl that Greg killed is just a joke setup. The whole episode treats alcoholism like a minor personality quirk that Peter can fix by throwing away 3 beers. Peter has also admitted to using hard drugs multiple times. In the 2007 episode, Peter's Two Dads, Peter's father Francis dies at Meg's birthday party. Peter is devastated. He decides to quit drinking alcohol to honor his father's memory. But instead of actually getting sober, Peter replaces alcohol with crack cocaine. Brian finds Peter sitting on the floor of the living room. Peter is shirtless and holding a crack pipe. His eyes are wild. He is clutching a couch cushion. Brian asks what Peter is doing. Peter screams that the government came and took his baby. He is completely incoherent. His speech is slurred and broken. This is played for laughs. The show presents Peter smoking crack as funny because he is so obviously high out of his mind. Brian points out that crack cocaine is not a good substitute for alcohol. Peter does not care. He keeps smoking crack throughout the episode.
When Brian asks where Peter got the crack, Peter says he got it from blacks.
Brian is shocked. Peter clarifies that he means the hardware store called Black's Hardware Store. There is a white guy selling crack behind the building. This is supposed to be a joke about racial stereotypes. Peter eventually goes to see a hypnotherapist to deal with his problems. The hypnotherapist helps Peter recover a repressed memory about his father. The crack addiction is never mentioned again after this episode. Peter does not go to rehab. He does not suffer withdrawal symptoms. He just stops using crack and goes back to drinking beer. The show never explains how Peter quit crack so easily. The Family Guy wiki page for Peter Griffin lists all the drugs he has used throughout the series. The list includes LSD, methamphetamine, ecstasy, marijuana, steroids, cocaine, and crack cocaine. These are confirmed from multiple episodes. In the episode Mr. Saturday Night, Peter uses steroids. In Model Misbehavior, he uses cocaine. In Deep Throats, he uses ecstasy. In April and Quahog, he uses marijuana. The show has explicitly shown Peter using nearly every major illegal drug. In the 2013 episode called Farmer Guy, Peter and his entire family make and sell methamphetamine. They find a meth lab in their storm cellar during a tornado. Lois wants to call the police. Peter convinces her to use the lab to make money instead. They start cooking meth and selling it throughout the town of Quahog. Peter becomes paranoid from using the product. He sets up a carrier pigeon delivery system. Stewie buys decongestants to help make more meth. The news reports that the Griffin family is responsible for flooding Quahog with methamphetamine. Nearly everyone in town becomes addicted to meth because of what the Griffins are doing. The crime rate skyrockets. People are dying from overdoses. The entire town is falling apart. Lois finally realizes they need to stop. The family packs up and moves back to their old house. They face no legal consequences for manufacturing and distributing methamphetamine across their entire town. Peter's substance abuse has caused serious medical problems that should have killed him. In the 2008 episode called McStroke, Peter eats 30 hamburgers in one sitting. He is trying to cope with the loss of his mustache, which burned off when he rescued someone from a fire. The restaurant owner gave Peter free hamburgers for life as a reward for saving him. Peter decides to eat as many as possible. While eating his 30th hamburger, Peter tells Brian that the food is working. He no longer feels pain. Then he says he cannot feel anything on the left side of his body. Brian asks if he is okay. Peter's left eye starts twitching uncontrollably. Brian asks if Peter is winking at him. Peter's entire body starts spasming. He screams and collapses on the floor. Brian yells for someone to call an ambulance. At the hospital, Dr. Hartman tells the family that Peter has had a stroke. The left half of his body is completely paralyzed. When the show cuts to Peter in the hospital bed, his appearance is horrifying. His left eye has slid down his face. Part of his mouth is drooping grotesquely. His left arm hangs limp and useless. He cannot move the left side of his body at all. He has a severe speech impediment because half his mouth does not work properly. The episode shows Peter trying to live with his stroke for 3 months. He walks with a limp. His arm drags behind him. His face is permanently disfigured. This is presented as his new reality. Peter will never fully recover from this stroke. The damage is permanent. He will spend the rest of his life partially paralyzed. Then one day, Peter happens to walk past a stem cell research facility. He goes inside. 5 minutes later, he walks back out, completely cured. His face is normal, his arm works, his leg works, there's no scarring, there are no lingering effects. The stroke damage that was supposed to be permanent is completely reversed in 5 minutes. The show does not explain how this works. Stem cell research in real life cannot cure a 3-month-old stroke in 5 minutes. This is not possible with any known medical technology. But the show does not care about medical accuracy. Peter is magically healed so the plot can continue. The stroke is never mentioned again. Dr. Hartman himself is an alcoholic. In the episode Friends of Peter G., Dr. Hartman attends the same Alcoholics Anonymous meetings as Peter. He admits that he once gave someone a back adjustment while drunk, even though he was not trained to do back adjustments. He skipped the weekend class that would have taught him how. He performed medical procedures while intoxicated on a patient without proper training. This is presented as a minor confession during an AA meeting. Doctor. Hartman faces no consequences for this medical malpractice. Peter's obesity and poor health have given him his own gravitational pull. In the episode The Fat Guy Strangler, objects start orbiting around Peter's body because his mass is so large. Brian throws an apple at Peter. The apple does not hit him. Instead, it starts circling around his body like a moon orbiting a planet. Brian throws a glass of water. It orbits Peter too. Brian throws a book, and then a television. All of these objects are trapped in orbit around Peter because his body mass has created a gravitational field. This is impossible. A human being cannot become massive enough to have their own gravity. The show is exaggerating Peter's weight to an absurd degree. But even with this exaggeration, the show treats Peter's obesity as normal. Nobody suggests that Peter should lose weight. Nobody expresses concern about his health. Lois does not try to put the family on a diet. Dr. Hartman does not warn Peter about diabetes or heart disease. Peter's extreme obesity is just another running joke. In the episode Peter Problems from 2014, Peter gets promoted to forklift operator at the Pawtucket Brewery where he works. He immediately starts drinking while operating heavy machinery. Peter lifts an entire vat of beer with the forklift. He drinks the entire vat while sitting in the forklift. He passes out from drinking too much. While unconscious, he drives the forklift through a wall into an executive meeting. His boss, Angela, emerges from the rubble and fires him. Peter was drinking on the job. He was operating dangerous equipment while intoxicated. He crashed through a wall and could have killed multiple executives in that meeting room. He is fired, but faces no other consequences. He is not arrested for drinking and driving the forklift. He is not sued for the property damage. He just loses his job, and the episode moves on to a different plot about Peter becoming impotent. The show has confirmed that Peter should not be able to afford any of the vehicles he owns. He has a regular job at a brewery. His salary should not cover a helicopter, a blimp, a pterodactyl, and various other expensive items. In the 2014 episode, Meg Stinks, Peter finally explains how he pays for everything. He takes Meg to a bank and tells her they are going to rob it. Meg protests. Peter says they need money because they are buying a zebra next week. Peter produces a rifle out of thin air and hands another rifle to Meg. He tells her to kill anyone who moves. This implies that Peter commits armed robbery on a regular basis to fund his lifestyle. He buys expensive vehicles and animals by robbing banks at gunpoint. The show presents this as a casual admission. Peter is a violent criminal who threatens bank employees with deadly weapons to steal money. This is treated as normal behavior for Peter. The amount of alcohol Peter consumes would kill a normal person. He drinks beer for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. He drinks at work. He drinks while driving. He drinks until he passes out multiple times per episode. A normal human liver cannot process this much alcohol. Peter should have liver disease, cirrhosis, kidney failure, and multiple other organ problems from decades of heavy drinking. Peter has used steroids, which damage the heart and liver. He has used cocaine, which causes heart attacks and strokes. He has used crack cocaine, which is even more damaging than regular cocaine. He has used methamphetamine, which destroys teeth and causes brain damage. He has used ecstasy, which can cause fatal overheating and dehydration. He has used LSD, which can cause psychological breaks. He has used marijuana, which is the least harmful drug on this list, but still affects brain function when used heavily. On top of all these drugs, Peter had a massive stroke from eating 30 hamburgers. The stroke left him paralyzed for 3 months. Even after being magically cured by stem cells, Peter should have suffered permanent brain damage. Strokes kill brain cells. Dead brain cells do not come back. Peter should have memory problems, cognitive impairment, difficulty speaking, and reduced motor function for the rest of his life. But none of this matters in Family Guy. Peter drinks himself to death and comes back to life with no consequences. He smokes crack and quits with no withdrawal. He has a stroke and is cured in 5 minutes. He manufactures methamphetamine and faces no legal charges. He robs banks at gunpoint and never gets arrested. He drives drunk regularly and only dies once, and then death brings him back. The show presents all of this as comedy. Peter's alcoholism is not a serious problem. It is a character trait that leads to funny situations. His drug use is not addressed as addiction. It is a plot device for specific episodes. His medical emergencies are not permanent consequences. They are temporary obstacles that get resolved quickly so the show can move on to the next joke. In real life, Peter Griffin would be dead. He would have died from liver failure, a heart attack, a drug overdose, or complications from his stroke. If he somehow survived all of that, he would be in prison for manufacturing methamphetamine, robbing banks, or killing someone while driving drunk. His family would have left him after years of abuse and addiction. His children would be in therapy dealing with trauma from growing up in a household with an alcoholic, drug-addicted father. But Family Guy is not real life. In Family Guy, Peter can do anything and face no real consequences. He can drink a vat of beer and just pass out. He can smoke crack and just act silly for one scene. He can have a stroke and be cured with science fiction technology. He can admit to multiple felonies on camera and never see the inside of a courtroom. The show has been on the air since 1999. For over 2 decades, audiences have watched Peter Griffin abuse alcohol and drugs with no lasting effects. Every episode ends with Peter back at the Drunken Clam, drinking beer with his friends. Every season starts fresh, with no mention of past medical emergencies or addiction problems. The show operates in a permanent present, where nothing Peter does has permanent consequences. Dr. Hartman enables this by being an incompetent alcoholic himself. He is supposed to be Peter's doctor. He should be warning Peter about the dangers of his lifestyle. He should be refusing to treat Peter unless he gets help for his addictions. He should be reporting Peter to the authorities when Peter admits to criminal behavior. But Dr. Hartman does none of these things. He makes jokes about Peter's condition and sends him home. The message the show sends is clear. Substance abuse is funny. Addiction is a personality quirk. Medical emergencies can be fixed instantly with no effort. Criminal behavior has no consequences. This is not a realistic portrayal of alcoholism or drug addiction. This is a cartoon where a fat man can drink unlimited beer, smoke crack, have a stroke, manufacture meth, and rob banks without ever facing real problems. Peter Griffin should be dead. Multiple doctors in real life would say he should not be alive given everything he has done to his body. But the show treats this as normal. Every week, Peter comes back for more. Every week, he drinks more beer. Every week, he does something stupid while intoxicated. Every week, he walks away with no permanent damage. This is the joke. This is what Family Guy considers entertainment. A man slowly killing himself with substance abuse, while everyone around him treats it like normal behavior. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Next up, Lois has shown clear violent tendencies throughout the series. This includes enjoying combat, killing in self-defense without hesitation, and openly admitting that she likes the feeling of power. Lois has shown violent tendencies, including enjoying combat, killing in self-defense without hesitation, and admitting she likes the feeling of power. Lois Griffin is supposed to be the responsible parent in the Griffin household. She is the voice of reason when Peter does something stupid, she takes care of the children, she manages the house, but underneath this normal housewife exterior, Lois has shown a disturbing pattern of violent behavior throughout the show. She does not just defend herself when necessary. She actively seeks out violence. She enjoys it. She admits that fighting makes her feel powerful. The show has confirmed this multiple times across different episodes. In the 2001 episode called Lethal Weapons, Lois joins a martial arts class with her neighbor Bonnie. The class teaches taijutsu, which is a Japanese martial art. Lois does not join the class because she feels threatened or needs to learn self-defense. She joins for fun. She advances through the ranks extremely quickly. Within what appears to be weeks or maybe months, Lois becomes a black belt. This normally takes years of dedicated training. The show does not explain how she learned so fast. She just does. At first, learning martial arts seems harmless. Lois practices her moves. She gets better at fighting. But something changes in her. Peter notices that New York tourists are invading Quahog during the fall to look at the changing leaves. These tourists are loud and rude. They litter, they take up space. Peter decides to use Lois's new fighting skills to drive the tourists away. Lois goes along with this plan. She goes to the Drunken Clam bar where tourists have gathered. She starts attacking them. She beats up multiple people who have done nothing to her except be annoying. These are not people threatening her family. These are not people attacking her first. They are just tourists looking at leaves. Lois uses her martial arts training to physically assault them until they leave town. The violence does not stop there. Lois becomes addicted to the feeling of power that comes from being able to hurt people. The show specifically states that Lois falls in love with the violence. She starts using violence to get what she wants at home. When she wants something from Peter or the children, she threatens them or hits them. Her family becomes afraid of her. At one point in the episode, Lois attacks her own martial arts instructor. This is her sensei, the person who taught her these skills. She challenges him to a fight. When he tries to de-escalate the situation, Lois goads him into fighting her anyway. She quotes a line from Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, saying, "Spin the wheel, Raggedy Man." This is a reference to a fight to the death in that movie. Lois is treating real violence like entertainment. The most disturbing part of this episode happens between Lois and Peter. Lois forces Peter to have sex with her when he does not want to. The show presents this as Lois being sexually aggressive because of her newfound confidence and power. But Peter clearly does not consent. He says no. Lois refuses to take no for an answer. This is sexual assault. The show plays it as a joke about Lois being empowered, but what actually happens on screen is Lois committing a crime against her husband. Later in the same episode, Peter and Lois get into an argument. Lois punches Peter hard in the face. Peter staggers backward. He tells her she just hit him. Lois responds smugly, saying, "That's right." She is not apologetic, she is not defensive. She is proud that she hit him. She gloats about it. This shows that Lois enjoys being able to hurt Peter. She likes the power imbalance. When Peter finally snaps and hits her back, Lois immediately tries to use her gender as a shield. She says, "You can't hit me, I'm a girl!" Peter responds, "Sometimes I wonder," which is meant to be a joke about Lois being masculine because of her mustache, but the real point is that Lois started the physical violence and then tried to claim she should be immune from retaliation. She wants to be able to hit people without consequences. The violence escalates until the entire family gets involved. Peter and Lois fight each other, then Meg and Chris start fighting, then Stewie and Brian start fighting for no reason at all. The whole family destroys their house in an all-out brawl. They only stop when they realize how ridiculous it all is. But even then, Stewie immediately resumes the fight by hitting Lois with a chair. At the end of the episode, the family tries to figure out what caused all this violence in their household. Lois suggests it was all the violent television they watch. Peter agrees and blames the network for showing violent content. This is the show making a meta joke about itself, but it also dodges the real issue. The violence did not start because of television. It started because Lois learned how to fight and discovered she enjoyed hurting people. The episode never addresses what happened properly. Lois does not get therapy. She does not face consequences for assaulting tourists, attacking her instructor, forcing Peter to have sex, or starting the family brawl. The show just moves on to the next episode. Lois keeps her black belt in taijutsu for the rest of the series. The knowledge that she can kill people with her bare hands becomes part of her permanent character. Almost a decade later, in the 2010 episode Baby You Knock Me Out, Lois returns to combat sports. Peter receives tickets to a boxing match for his birthday. At the match, the boxer challenges people from the audience to fight her. Peter uses a fake hand that looks like Lois's hand to volunteer Lois without her consent. Lois is forced into the ring. Lois tries to explain that this is a mistake. She does not want to fight. But then her opponent says something that makes her angry. Lois snaps. She imagines that the woman in front of her is Peter. All her rage at Peter surfaces. She beats the woman unconscious in seconds. The fight is over before it really begins. After the fight, Lois cannot understand what happened. She does not know why she won so easily. Peter tricks her into going to another fight by blindfolding her and telling her they are going to a fancy restaurant. When Lois realizes what is happening, she is furious at Peter for lying to her. But once again, she channels her anger at Peter into violence against her opponent. She imagines she is beating up Peter. She wins again. Lois discovers that this technique works. If she pictures Peter as her opponent, she can unleash all her pent-up rage. She starts taking boxing seriously. She works out, she trains, she fights professionally. The show states that she becomes the top-ranked fighter in Rhode Island. She wins fight after fight, imagining Peter's face on every opponent. Lois retires with an undefeated record of 18 wins and 0 losses. She reveals to Peter that the only reason she was able to fight so well was because she imagined beating him up. She admits that she cannot actually beat up Peter in real life, so she used her opponents as surrogate. She says she got most of it out of her system and retires from boxing. But then a fighter named Deirdre Jackson challenges Lois to come out of retirement. Deirdre Jackson is described as one of the most dangerous fighters in Rhode Island. Brian tells Stewie that Deirdre has killed 3 people in the ring. 3 women died fighting Deirdre Jackson. She was not arrested. She was not banned from boxing. She kept fighting after killing 3 opponents. Deirdre humiliates Peter publicly to provoke Lois into accepting the fight. She makes Peter take his shirt off and get on his hands and knees. She milks his breasts like he is a cow. This sexual humiliation of Peter finally makes Lois angry enough to agree to fight. In an interview before the match, Deirdre announces on television that she plans to kill Lois during round 6 of their fight. She does not say she might accidentally kill her. She says she will kill her intentionally. She has done it before to 3 other women. She will do it again to Lois. The fight begins. Deirdre dominates Lois completely in the first round. Lois cannot land a single punch. Deirdre beats her badly. The fight continues for 6 rounds, with Deirdre winning every round. Brian begs Lois to quit because Deirdre confirmed she plans to murder her in the ring. But Lois refuses to give up. In round 6, Deirdre hits Lois with a massive left hook that nearly knocks her unconscious. Lois should go down and stay down, but she recovers. She taps into some deep well of rage inside herself. She unleashes everything she has been holding back. She beats Deirdre Jackson unconscious. She wins the fight and defeats the woman who killed 3 other fighters. The show presents this as a triumphant moment. Lois overcame impossible odds. She beat the unbeatable opponent. But the reality is that Lois won by accessing her capacity for extreme violence. She did not win through skill or technique. She won through pure rage. The same rage that made her attack tourists and force Peter to have sex with her in lethal weapons. The same rage that made her assault her martial arts instructor. Lois has this violence inside her all the time. She just needs the right trigger to let it out. The most revealing episode about Lois's violent nature is the 2-part story called Stewie Kills Lois and Lois Kills Stewie from 2007. These episodes were marketed as the 100th episode special. The creator of Family Guy announced beforehand that someone would die. The title suggested it would be Lois. In the first episode, Stewie shoots Lois on a cruise ship and she falls overboard. Everyone thinks she is dead. A year passes. Peter is put on trial for her murder. Then Lois appears alive in the courtroom. She reveals that Stewie was the one who tried to kill her. She explains that she survived by being rescued by a merman and suffered amnesia for months. Stewie escapes and takes over the world by controlling the global power grid. He becomes president of the world and institutes cruel and unusual laws. He creates concentration camps. He makes sexual intercourse illegal and punishable by death. He forces everyone to get milk from Hilary Swank's breasts. He throws people in prison for using bad grammar. Stewie becomes a complete tyrant. Lois decides she cannot let her son terrorize the world. She goes to Stewie's weapons vault, the same one he has been using to store guns and explosives throughout the series. She arms herself with multiple weapons. She crashes through the window of the Oval Office where Stewie is ruling as dictator. Lois and Stewie engage in a violent battle using guns, explosives, and other weapons. The fight is destructive. They destroy the Oval Office. They shoot at each other. They use every weapon they can find. Lois eventually gains the upper hand. She points a shotgun at Stewie's head. She prepares to kill him. Stewie taunts her. He tells her to do it. He says she does not have the strength to kill her own child. Stewie is right. Lois cannot bring herself to pull the trigger. She admits that even though Stewie is evil, he is still her baby. She cannot murder him. She drops the gun. Stewie immediately takes advantage of her weakness. He picks up the gun and prepares to kill Lois. He has no problem killing his mother. Before he can shoot, Peter bursts into the room and shoots Stewie twice, killing him. Then the episode reveals that none of this actually happened. The entire 2-part story was a computer simulation that Stewie was running to see what would happen if he tried to kill Lois. It was all fake. Peter and Lois are still on their cruise having a good time. Stewie never shot Lois. Lois never fought Stewie in the Oval Office. But even though it was a simulation, the episode reveals important information about Lois's character. When pushed to the absolute limit, when her son has become a murderous dictator killing innocent people and ruining the world, Lois is willing and able to fight him to the death. She arms herself. She attacks without hesitation.
She does not try to talk him down. She does not try to reason with him. She goes straight to lethal violence. The only thing that stops Lois from killing Stewie is her maternal instinct. She loves him too much to pull the trigger, but she was willing to try. She pointed the gun at his head. She was ready to do it. If Stewie had been anyone else, Lois would have killed him without hesitation.
The simulation proved that Lois is capable of murder when she believes it is justified. Across all these episodes, a pattern emerges. Lois does not just defend herself when attacked, she seeks out violence. She enjoys the feeling of power that comes from being able to hurt people. In Lethal Weapons, she admits to falling in love with violence. In Baby, You Knock Me Out, she reveals that boxing was just a way to channel her rage at Peter by imagining she was beating him up. In Lois Kills Stewie, she arms herself and attacks her own son without trying non-violent solutions first. Lois is a black belt in Taijutsu. She is an undefeated professional boxer with 18 wins. She knows how to use guns, explosives, and other weapons. She has killed people in simulations. She has beaten people unconscious in real life. She forced her husband to have sex against his will. She attacked her martial arts instructor. She assaulted innocent tourists for being annoying. She started a family brawl that destroyed her house. The show never treats any of this as a serious problem. Lois does not go to therapy for her anger issues. She does not face legal consequences for assault. She does not lose custody of her children despite being violent in front of them. The episodes present her violence as empowering or funny. When Lois beats people up, it is supposed to be entertaining because she is a woman, and women are not usually shown as violent on television. But the reality shown on screen is that Lois has serious anger management problems. She cannot control her violent impulses when triggered. She uses physical force to get what she wants. She admits to enjoying the feeling of power that comes from hurting people. These are not the traits of a stable, healthy person. These are warning signs of someone who could seriously hurt or kill someone. Lois Griffin is a mother of 3 children. She is married. She lives in a nice house in a small town. On the surface, she looks like a normal housewife, but she has beaten dozens of people unconscious with her bare hands. She is admitted to loving violence. She has shown that when angry enough, she will attempt murder. The show treats this as normal. Every episode ends with the family back together as if nothing happened. Lois goes back to making dinner and taking care of the kids. Nobody mentions that she put 3 people in the hospital last week by boxing them into unconsciousness. The most disturbing part is that Lois is fully aware of what she is doing. She is not having psychotic breaks. She is not possessed. She is not under mind control. When she beats people up, she knows exactly what she is doing. She makes conscious choices to use violence. She chooses to imagine Peter's face on her boxing opponents so she can hit them harder. She chooses to attack her martial arts instructor. She chooses to force Peter into sex. These are deliberate actions, not accidents. Lois Griffin has all the warning signs of an abuser. She uses physical violence to control her family. She forces sexual contact on her spouse. She enjoys hurting people. She shows no remorse for her actions. She blames her victims for making her angry. When Peter hits her back after she assaulted him first, she tries to claim special protection because of her gender. These are textbook abuse tactics. But Family Guy is a comedy. The violence is supposed to be funny. Lois beating people unconscious is presented as girl power and female empowerment. The show never acknowledges the serious real-world implications of what Lois does. In real life, Lois would be in prison for assault. Her children would be in foster care. Peter would have grounds for divorce based on her forcing him into sex and physically abusing him. Instead, the show rewards Lois's violence. She becomes a champion boxer. She gets a statue built in her honor. She is celebrated for beating people up. The message is clear. Violence works. If you are angry, hitting people will make you feel better. If you want power, learn to fight. The show never shows Lois facing real consequences, so there is no reason for her to change her behavior. Lois Griffin is dangerous. She has proven this repeatedly across multiple episodes spanning decades of the show. She is trained to kill with her bare hands. She owns weapons. She has admitted to enjoying violence and power.
She has shown zero remorse for the people she has hurt. And the show treats all of this as completely normal and acceptable behavior for a suburban housewife and mother. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, Lois has repeatedly implied that she regrets motherhood, openly stating that having kids ruined her ambitions and stripped away her freedom. Lois has repeatedly implied she regrets motherhood, openly stating that having kids ruined her ambitions and freedom. Lois Griffin looks like the perfect suburban mother on the surface. She takes care of 3 children, she manages the household, she cooks and cleans. She tries to keep Peter from doing anything too stupid. But throughout the show, Lois has repeatedly made it clear that she never wanted this life. She never wanted to be a mother. She gave up multiple career opportunities because she got pregnant. She lost her freedom, she lost her identity, and the show has confirmed this over and over again through different episodes spanning more than 2 decades. The clearest statement of this comes from the episode A Fish Out of Water, which aired in 2001. In this episode, Lois takes Meg on a spring break trip. During an awkward car ride, Lois tells Meg something shocking. She admits that Meg was an accident. Lois was taking birth control pills specifically to prevent pregnancy, but she was also taking antibiotics at the same time. The antibiotics interfered with the birth control and made it stop working. Lois got pregnant with Meg, even though she was actively trying not to get pregnant. This is not a casual detail. This is Lois directly telling her daughter that she never intended for her to exist. Lois was planning her life without children. She was taking active steps to prevent pregnancy. But the birth control failed, and Meg was born anyway. The show does not present this as Lois being happy about an unexpected blessing. It presents this as Lois explaining to Meg that her birth was unwanted. The fact that Lois was on birth control when she got pregnant with Meg reveals that motherhood was never part of her plan. She did not choose to have children. She did not decide it was time to start a family. She got pregnant by accident, despite trying to prevent it. And once Meg was born, Lois's entire life changed in ways she never wanted. Before getting pregnant with Meg, Lois had real ambitions. She had actual career prospects. She had opportunities that most people never get. The episode Stewie Be Good, which aired in 2006, reveals that Lois was an accomplished diver. She was so good at diving that she was offered a spot on the American Olympic diving team. This is an enormous achievement. Only the best athletes in the entire country make it onto an Olympic team. Lois had talent. She had trained for years. She had earned her place among the elite. But Lois had to drop out of the Olympic team when she got pregnant with Meg. She could not compete in the Olympics while pregnant. She could not train at that level while dealing with pregnancy and then caring for a newborn baby. Her Olympic career ended before it even started. She never got to compete on the world stage. She never got to represent her country. She never got to find out how far her athletic ability could have taken her. All of that potential disappeared because she got pregnant at the wrong time. Lois gave up an Olympic career for Meg. This was not a small sacrifice. This was giving up a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that she had worked for years to achieve. Most people never come close to making an Olympic team. Lois made it, and then had to walk away. The show makes it clear that this happened because of the pregnancy. If Meg had not been born, Lois would have been an Olympian. Beyond her athletic career, Lois also had academic and professional ambitions. Multiple sources confirm that Lois studied at Kent State University and wanted to become a lawyer. This means she was pursuing higher education with a specific career goal in mind. Becoming a lawyer requires years of college, followed by law school. It requires passing the bar exam. It is a difficult path that requires dedication and intelligence. Lois was on that path. She had those plans. But those dreams disappeared when Peter got her pregnant and they had a child. Lois never became a lawyer. She never went to law school. She never practiced law. Instead, she became a housewife. Her resume, as shown in the episode Call Girl, lists her as a housewife since 1992, with no other professional experience mentioned. She has been doing nothing but household work for decades. All her education and all her potential went nowhere because she had children instead. Lois also had passion for music. In early episodes of the show, she gave piano lessons to supplement the family income. But the episode Wasted Talent describes her as a frustrated pianist who competes vicariously through her students. This is a crucial description. A frustrated pianist is someone who wanted to achieve more with music than they did. Someone who feels like they never reached their full potential. Someone who gave up their own musical career.
Lois channels her frustration into her students because she cannot pursue her own musical ambitions anymore. She lives through their successes because she never got to have her own.
She pushes them to win competitions because she never won competitions herself. She is trying to accomplish through them what she failed to accomplish in her own life.
This is not the behavior of someone who is satisfied with how their life turned out. This is the behavior of someone with deep regrets about the path they ended up on. The reason Lois gave up her piano career is the same reason she gave up everything else. She had children. She became a mother. And motherhood consumed all her time and energy and potential. Her resume confirms this. Since 1992, when her first child would have been young, Lois has done nothing professionally except be a housewife. She stopped teaching piano at some point. She stopped pursuing her own musical development. She gave it all up to take care of her family. Lois also wanted to pursue modeling. This is mentioned in the episode Model Misbehavior and confirmed by other sources. Her father would not let her pursue modeling as a career when she was younger. But even after she was an adult and could make her own choices, she never pursued modeling professionally. Why? Because she had children. Because she was busy being a mother and housewife. Because there was no time or opportunity to build a modeling career while raising 3 kids. All of these lost careers and abandoned dreams add up to a picture of a woman who sacrificed everything she wanted for a life she never chose. Lois could have been an Olympian. She could have been a lawyer. She could have been a professional pianist. She could have been a model. She had the talent and the opportunities to pursue all of these paths. But she ended up as a housewife in Quahog, Rhode Island, married to an idiot, taking care of 3 children she never planned to have. The show has directly stated multiple times that Lois never wanted to be a mother. This is not speculation or interpretation. The Family Guy Wiki, which compiles information from actual episodes, states clearly that Lois has made it clear several times throughout the series that she never wanted to be a mother. This is canon. This is part of her established character. Lois did not want children, but she had children anyway. And according to the episode The Candidate, the circumstances were even worse than just birth control failure. That episode reveals that Meg, Chris, and Stewie were all conceived after Lois raped Peter in order to get pregnant. She forced him to have sex with her specifically because she wanted to get pregnant. Why would she do this if she never wanted to be a mother? Because she felt like her existence needed to be justified by becoming a mother. This is an incredibly dark reveal about Lois's psychology. She did not want children, but she felt so worthless and purposeless in her life that she thought having children would give her existence meaning. She thought becoming a mother would justify her life. So she committed sexual assault against her own husband to force a pregnancy to happen. And then she ended up with 3 children that she never actually wanted, conceived through violence, born out of desperation rather than love. Chris's conception has a different story. According to the episode Mission Impossible, Chris was the result of a broken condom. This means Chris, like Meg, was an accident. Lois did not plan to have a second child. She and Peter were using protection. The condom broke and Chris was conceived. The resulting lawsuit over the defective condom paid for the Griffin house, but that does not change the fact that Chris was unplanned and unwanted. So Lois has 3 children. Meg was conceived because birth control failed. Chris was conceived because a condom broke. Stewie was conceived after Lois raped Peter to get pregnant out of desperation to feel like her life had meaning. None of these pregnancies were planned in a healthy way. None of these children were conceived out of a genuine desire to be a mother. They all happened through accidents, contraceptive failures, or acts of violence. And Lois has spent decades raising these children while watching her life slip away. Every opportunity she ever had is gone. Every dream she ever pursued ended in failure or abandonment. She is stuck in Quahog as a housewife, which is the one thing her resume says she has been since 1992. That is more than 30 years of doing nothing but household work. More than 30 years of no professional development, no career advancement. No personal growth, just cooking and cleaning and taking care of a family that she never wanted in the first place. The frustration and resentment from this trapped existence comes out in different ways throughout the series. In the episode Lois Comes Out of Her Shell, which aired in 2012, Lois has a full-blown midlife crisis when she turns 43 years old. Peter throws her a birthday party,
but then reads a poem that insults her aging body and mocks her lost youth. He calls her an old plow horse. He makes jokes about how she used to be attractive, but now she is old and past her prime. This devastates Lois. She realizes that she is 43 years old and her youth is gone. She has spent her entire adult life being a mother and housewife. She gave up the Olympics for this. She gave up law school for this. She gave up piano for this. She gave up modeling for this. And now she is middle-aged and has nothing to show for it except 3 children she never wanted and a husband who insults her at her own birthday party. Lois responds to this crisis by trying to reclaim her youth. She dyes her hair blonde. She gets a tattoo. She changes her wardrobe to look younger. She starts partying and acting like a teenager. She even tries to seduce Justin Bieber, who was 18 years old at the time. Peter has to physically stop her from sleeping with Bieber. Lois was fully prepared to cheat on her husband with a teenager because she was so desperate to feel young and free again. This is not normal midlife crisis behavior. This is the behavior of someone who feels like their entire life was stolen from them. Someone who spent their youth and their prime years trapped in a role they never chose. Someone who looked up one day and realized they wasted decades of their life on a family they never wanted. The midlife crisis was Lois trying to get back some small piece of what she lost, trying to feel alive again, trying to remember what it was like to have freedom and options and a future. The show also reveals that Lois developed kleptomania as a direct result of feeling like a prisoner in her life as a mother and housewife. Kleptomania is a compulsive stealing disorder. People with kleptomania feel an overwhelming urge to steal things, not because they need the items or want to sell them, but because the act of stealing gives them a feeling of control and excitement. It is often linked to feeling powerless or trapped in other areas of life. Lois steals because she feels like a prisoner. She cannot escape her role as a mother. She cannot escape her responsibilities as a housewife. She is trapped in this life that she never chose, so she steals things as a way to feel like she has some power, some control, some ability to break rules and do what she wants instead of what she is supposed to do. The kleptomania is a symptom of the much deeper problem, which is that Lois feels completely powerless over her own life. In a season 16 episode, Lois has a conversation with her son Chris while he is in a coma. She admits things to him that she would never say if he could hear her. She tells him that she wants more in her life. She admits that she is not satisfied with being a housewife and mother. She explains why she stays in this role even though she hates it. She is terrified that her past will catch up with her. She knows she has done bad things. And she ends the conversation with a chilling line about how every mother has killed someone. This confession reveals the truth about Lois's situation. She wants more from life. She knows she is capable of more. She has dreams and ambitions that go unfulfilled. But she stays trapped in her role as a mother because she believes she has no other choice. She believes her past sins, whatever they are, mean she deserves to be trapped in this life. She has accepted her prison sentence and decided to serve her time as a housewife and mother, even though it is killing her inside. The combination of all these elements paints a clear picture. Lois Griffin is a woman who had enormous potential. She was talented enough to make the Olympic team. She was smart enough to pursue law. She was skilled enough to teach piano. She was attractive enough to model. She could have done anything. She could have been anyone. But she got pregnant by accident. Her birth control failed, her condoms broke, and she ended up with 3 children she never wanted. She had to give up the Olympics. She had to abandon law school. She had to stop playing piano professionally. She had to forget about modeling. All her dreams died so she could raise children she never planned to have. And now she is stuck. She is in her 40s with no career, no achievements, and no future prospect. Her resume says she has been a housewife since 1992. That is all she is. That is all she will ever be. Every door that was once open to her is now closed. Every opportunity is gone. Every dream is dead. Lois lives vicariously through her piano students because she cannot live her own life. She developed kleptomania because she feels like a prisoner. She had a midlife crisis and tried to seduce a teenager because she desperately wanted to feel young and free again. She confessed while talking to her comatose son that she wants more from life, but feels trapped. The show has made it abundantly clear through multiple episodes across multiple seasons that Lois Griffin regrets motherhood. She never wanted to be a mother. She told Meg directly that her birth was an accident caused by failed birth control. She gave up an Olympic diving career because of pregnancy. She abandoned her dreams of becoming a lawyer. She stopped pursuing music professionally. She sacrificed everything she wanted to raise 3 children she never planned to have. And the worst part is that nothing has changed. Lois is still stuck in the same role decades later. She is still just a housewife, still just a mother, still trapped in the life she never chose. The children are older now, but they still need her. Peter still needs her to be the responsible one. The house still needs cleaning. The meals still need cooking. There is no end in sight. This is her life forever. Lois Griffin represents the dark side of motherhood that society does not like to acknowledge. She is the woman who gave up everything and got nothing in return. She is the woman who sacrificed her dreams and her identity for children who were born by accident. She is the woman who feels like a prisoner in her own life, stealing things and having midlife crises, and confessing to her comatose son that she wants more. The show does not pretend that motherhood is always fulfilling. It does not pretend that every woman who has children is happy about it. Through Lois, Family Guy shows the reality that some women end up as mothers even though they never wanted to be. Some women lose their entire identity to motherhood. Some women spend decades trapped in a role they never chose, watching their dreams die one by one, feeling their youth and their potential slip away while they cook dinner and do laundry and raise children they never wanted in the first place. Lois Griffin had a future. She had options. She had talent and intelligence and opportunities, and all of it disappeared because her birth control failed at the wrong time. Now she is just a housewife in Quahog, Rhode Island, living a life she never wanted, raising children she never planned to have, married to a man who calls her an old plow horse at her birthday party. This is what having children cost her. This is what motherhood took away. And the show has made it clear that Lois knows exactly what she lost and exactly how much she regrets it. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Next up, Stewie has successfully murdered people across multiple timelines, including alternate versions of himself, and consistently shows no guilt when doing so. Stewie has successfully murdered people across timelines, including alternate versions of himself, and shows no guilt when doing so. Stewie Griffin is a 1-year-old baby who talks like a grown man with a British accent. He is supposed to be an infant, but Stewie is also a mass murderer who has killed people across different timelines without showing any guilt or remorse. He has murdered alternate versions of other people, he has killed his neighbors, he has let people die on purpose. And the show treats all of this as normal behavior for a baby genius. The clearest example of Stewie killing someone from another timeline happens in the episode Road to Germany, which aired in 2008. In this episode, Mort Goldman accidentally enters Stewie's time machine, thinking it is a bathroom. He gets sent back to Warsaw, Poland on September 1st, 1939, which is the day the Nazis invaded Poland at the start of World War II. Stewie and Brian realize what happened and use the time machine to go back and rescue Mort. They find Mort in Poland and have to escape from the Nazis. The return pad breaks, so they cannot immediately return to the present. They travel to England to stay safe while they fix the device. They need uranium to power the return pad, so they go to Nazi Germany to steal it. Stewie disguises himself as Adolf Hitler to get the uranium. They encounter the real Hitler, who orders them executed, but they escape back to the present using the return pad. When they arrive back in Stewie's room, they arrive exactly 30 seconds before Mort originally entered the time machine. This means there are now 2 versions of Mort. There is the Mort who is about to enter the time machine, and the Mort who just traveled through time with Stewie and Brian. To prevent the time travel events from happening again, Stewie decides to kill the Mort who traveled with them. Stewie pushes Mort into the time machine and blows it up. This is cold-blooded murder. Mort did nothing wrong. He accidentally used the time machine thinking it was a bathroom. Stewie and Brian chose to go back in time to save him. They spent the whole episode trying to rescue Mort from the Nazis and bring him home safely. And then as soon as they get back, Stewie murders him to prevent a time loop. Stewie shows absolutely no hesitation. He does not ask Mort if this is okay. He does not try to find another solution. He does not express any sadness or regret. He just shoves Mort into the time machine and destroys it with Mort inside. The explosion kills Mort instantly. Stewie eliminates the evidence and the problem at the same time. The episode ends with this murder being treated as a logical solution to the time travel paradox. This is not the only time Stewie has murdered people without guilt.
The two-part episode Stewie Kills Lois and Lois Kills Stewie from 2007 shows Stewie at his most murderous. These episodes were marketed as the 100th episode of Family Guy. The creator announced beforehand that someone would die. The title makes it clear who Stewie's target is. In the first episode, Lois and Peter go on a cruise for Lois's birthday. They do not take Stewie with them. Stewie is furious about being left behind. Brian tells Stewie that he will never actually kill Lois because he always talks about it but never follows through. This makes Stewie determined to prove Brian wrong. He takes a speedboat to the cruise ship, confronts Lois on the deck, and shoots her multiple times with a gun. Lois falls overboard into the ocean. Everyone thinks she is dead. 1 year passes. During this year, Stewie shows no remorse whatsoever for killing his mother. He does not feel guilty, he does not have nightmares, he does not regret his actions. When Brian realizes that Stewie actually killed Lois, he is horrified. But Stewie is proud of himself. He brags about pulling off the perfect murder. He kept drawings of different ways to kill Lois as souvenirs of his crime. He only throws them away because Brian is trying to expose him and keeping evidence is too risky. The Griffins return home after Lois appears alive in the courtroom and reveals Stewie tried to kill her. Stewie ties them all up in the living room. Cleveland casually walks into the house during this. Stewie shoots and kills Cleveland in front of the terrified family without hesitation. He murders Cleveland simply because Cleveland walked in at the wrong time. There is no reason for it. Cleveland was not a threat, he was just visiting. Stewie kills him as easily as swatting a fly. Stewie then kidnaps Brian and forces him to drive to the CIA headquarters in Langley Falls, Virginia. Stewie takes control of the global power grid by hacking into the CIA's supercomputer. He threatens to shut down all electricity in the world unless everyone submits to his rule. The CIA surrenders. Stewie becomes president of the world. As the ruler of Earth, Stewie implements cruel and unusual laws. He bans direct-to-video Disney films. He requires everyone to throw apples at Peter. He makes sexual intercourse illegal and punishable by death. He requires all milk to come from Hilary Swank's breasts. He creates concentration camps for people who commit ridiculous crimes. In the DVD version of the episode, he sings a song about all the people he plans to execute for minor annoyances. The song lists various people and how he will kill them. The girl who does not get the jokes in the movie Caddyshack gets crushed by the television playing that movie. An Asian man who cuts in line gets pushed onto roller coaster tracks and run over by the train. A student who smells bad gets dropped into a pit of spikes. The entire cast of the TV show Entourage gets executed just for being on that show. A man who keeps farting on an airplane gets thrown out the airlock to die of asphyxiation. Stewie plans all these murders and executions without any moral concern. It is later revealed that the entire two-part episode was a computer simulation. Stewie was running a program to see what would happen if he tried to kill Lois. None of it actually happened. Peter and Lois are still on their cruise having a good time. Stewie never shot Lois. He never killed Cleveland. He never took over the world. It was all fake. But the simulation reveals important information about Stewie's character. Even in a simulation, he is willing and able to commit murder without guilt. He shoots his mother multiple times and watches her fall into the ocean. He murders Cleveland for no reason. He plans executions for people who annoy him. The simulation shows that Stewie has the capacity for extreme violence and feels no remorse about it. The only reason he decides not to kill Lois in real life is because the simulation showed him getting killed by Peter at the end. He avoids murder not because it is wrong, but because it might get him killed. Stewie has also killed people in episodes that were not simulations. In the episode And Then There Were Fewer from 2010, several characters are murdered at James Woods' mansion during a party. The murderer is revealed to be Diane Simmons, the news anchor. She has been killing people to frame her co-anchor Tom Tucker because he wanted to replace her with a younger woman. At the end of the episode, Diane holds Lois at gunpoint and is about to kill her. Stewie shoots Diane from the mansion roof with a sniper rifle. The bullet hits Diane and she falls dead. Stewie killed her to save Lois, but his reasoning is disturbing. He says that no one kills Lois except him.
He does not save Lois because he loves her or because murder is wrong. He saves her because he considers killing Lois to be his job, and Diane is stealing his opportunity. This is possessive and psychotic thinking from a 1-year-old babe. Stewie has also murdered or allowed people to die in other episodes throughout the series. In the episode Dog Gone, Stewie murders a replacement dog named New Brian. Peter had adopted New Brian after the original Brian strained his back trying to save Peter from drowning. Stewie hates New Brian because the new dog is too cheerful. When Stewie discovers that New Brian violated his teddy bear Rupert, Stewie decides to get revenge. He murders New Brian, cuts up his body, and throws the pieces in the trash. This is premeditated murder followed by dismembering the corpse. In the episode Send in Stewie, Please, Stewie has a therapy session with a child psychologist named Dr. Cecil Pritchfield. The doctor gets Stewie to open up about his secrets. Stewie reveals deep truths about himself, including that he actually speaks with an American accent and only uses the British accent as an affectation. But then, Dr. Pritchfield starts having a heart attack during the session. He asks Stewie for help. He is dying and needs someone to call for medical assistance. Stewie refuses to help. He watches Dr. Pritchfield suffer and die because he does not want the doctor to tell anyone his secrets. He would rather let a man die in agony than risk his private information becoming public. This is murder by deliberate inaction. Stewie had the ability to save Dr. Pritchfield's life by simply calling for help. He chose not to. The episode shows Stewie feeling some guilt about this afterward. He struggles to sleep that night. He admits to Brian that he did something terrible, but he refuses to discuss what happened. He feels bad enough to lose sleep, but not bad enough to confess or face consequences. According to the Family Guy wiki, it is implied that Stewie killed 7 babies without remorse by keeping them imprisoned in a booby trap. The exact episode is not specified, but the implication is that Stewie set traps that killed multiple infants and felt no guilt about it. Killing 7 babies would make Stewie a serial killer of children. But the show does not treat this as a serious crime. It is mentioned as just another thing Stewie has done. Stewie has also killed people indirectly through his inventions. In one episode, Stewie creates an evil clone of himself by accident when trying to bring out a more villainous side of his personality. The experiment goes wrong and creates a separate evil version of Stewie, who is focused only on injury and murder. This evil Stewie cuts off Brian's tail and feeds it to the real Stewie. Then evil Stewie murders a woman to steal her car. Brian eventually kills evil Stewie, but the real Stewie created the monster that murdered an innocent woman. He is responsible for that death, even though the clone was the one who pulled the trigger. Throughout all of these murders and deaths, Stewie shows a consistent pattern. He kills people when they inconvenience him or threaten his plans. He kills Mort because having 2 Morts would create a time loop problem. He kills Cleveland because Cleveland walked in during the wrong moment. He kills Diane because she is trying to kill Lois and only Stewie gets to kill Lois. He kills New Brian because the dog annoyed him and violated his teddy bear. He lets Dr. Pritchfield die because the doctor knows his secrets. He kills or plans to kill anyone who gets in his way. Stewie never expresses genuine remorse after these murders. He does not go to therapy to work through his violent tendencies. He does not turn himself in to the police. He does not apologize to the families of his victims. He shows brief guilt about Dr. Pritchfield, but refuses to talk about it or change his behavior. The simulation of killing Lois does not make him realize that murder is wrong. It only makes him realize that murder might have consequences for him personally. The show presents Stewie's murders as entertainment. When he blows up Mort in the time machine, it is treated as a punchline. When he shoots Cleveland in the simulation, it is meant to shock the audience, but also to be funny. When he murders Diane Simmons, it is presented as Stewie being protective of Lois in his own twisted way. The deaths are not treated as tragedies. They are treated as jokes or plot devices. Stewie Griffin is a mass murderer. He has killed people across different timelines. He has murdered his neighbors. He has executed people for minor annoyances. He has let people die when he could have saved them. He has created killing machines and evil clones that murdered on his behalf. And he has done all of this without showing any real guilt or remorse. The brief moment of guilt over Dr. Pritchfield is the exception that proves the rule.
In every other case, Stewie kills without hesitation and moves on with his life as if nothing happened. The fact that Stewie is a baby makes this even more disturbing. This is not an adult sociopath. This is a 1-year-old infant with the intelligence of a genius and the morality of a serial killer. He has advanced technology that allows him to build weapons and time machines. He has the physical capability to commit murder despite his small size. And he has absolutely no moral compass stopping him from killing anyone who gets in his way. Stewie represents the dark potential of intelligence without empathy. He is smart enough to understand exactly what he is doing when he kills people. He knows that murder is considered wrong by society. He just does not care. His goals and his convenience matter more to him than human life. If someone needs to die for Stewie to accomplish his plans, he kills them. If someone knows too much about his secrets, he lets them die. If someone annoys him enough, he murders them and disposes of the body. Family Guy has shown Stewie commit or plan murders in multiple episodes across more than 2 decades of the show. The pattern is clear and consistent. Stewie is a murderer who feels no guilt about taking lives. He kills people from other timelines. He kills people in simulations, he kills people in reality, and the show treats all of this as normal behavior for their genius baby character. Stewie Griffin is one of the most prolific murderers on television, and he gets away with it every single time because he is cute and funny, and nobody takes a baby seriously, even when that baby is holding a smoking gun. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to, despite being a baby, Stewie demonstrates adult-level nihilism, openly questioning existence, fate, and whether life has any meaning at all. Despite being a baby, Stewie demonstrates adult-level nihilism, openly questioning existence, fate, and whether life has any meaning at all. Stewie Griffin is 1 year old. He is a baby who should be learning to walk and playing with toys. Instead, Stewie spends his time questioning whether life has any meaning at all. He wonders if existence serves any purpose. He asks deep questions about death and what comes after. He thinks about fate and whether anything anyone does actually matters. These are the kinds of thoughts that usually belong to sad adults sitting alone at 3 in the morning. But Stewie asks them as casually as most babies ask for their bottles. The clearest example of Stewie confronting his own mortality happens in the episode Mom's the Word from season 12. Peter's mother Thelma Griffin dies of a stroke. The family gathers for her funeral. Stewie attends the service like everyone else. During the funeral, Brian tells Stewie that everyone dies at some point. Stewie asks if that includes him. Brian confirms that yes, even Stewie will die someday. This is the first time Stewie truly understands that his own death is inevitable. Stewie's reaction to this news is immediate and severe. He cannot sleep that night. He lies awake, terrified of dying. He tells Brian that he is scared. Brian tries to reassure him by taking him to different religious institutions to hear what they believe happens after death. They visit a Jewish synagogue, they go to other houses of worship. Stewie listens to all the explanations about the afterlife. None of them satisfy him. He finds no comfort in any religious answer to the question of what happens when you die. Things get much worse when Brian shares his own beliefs. Brian is an atheist. He tells Stewie that he believes there is nothing after death. When you die, it is like lights going out. There is no heaven, there is no reincarnation, there is no continuation of consciousness. You just stop existing. Death is final and absolute. For Brian, life is just sitting around waiting for death to arrive. There is no deeper meaning or purpose. This explanation horrifies Stewie. If Brian is right, then life has no point. Nothing matters because everything ends. All experiences are temporary. All achievements are meaningless because they will be erased by death. Stewie becomes so distressed by this nihilistic worldview that he decides to kill himself rather than wait for death to come naturally. If death is inevitable and there is nothing after it, why bother living at all? Why sit through all the pain and disappointment when the outcome is always the same? Stewie attempts suicide multiple times in this episode. He tries to hang himself first, but his misshapen head will not allow the rope to fit properly around his neck, so the hanging fails. He then attempts what is called suicide by cop, which means provoking a police officer into shooting him. The officer who responds is Joe Swanson. But Joe has his own suicidal thoughts and asks Stewie to kill him instead. This attempt also fails. Stewie tries yet again by dropping a toaster into the bathtub while he is in it. This should electrocute him and cause death.
Instead, the electric shock somehow gives Stewie superpowers. He does not die from this either. Every suicide attempt ends in failure. Stewie cannot even successfully kill himself when he desperately wants to.
Brian eventually finds Stewie preparing to jump out of a window.
This would be a fall from multiple stories that should kill him on impact. Brian stops him before he can jump. He tells Stewie that he should not be afraid of living in the moment.
Brian explains that nobody knows what comes next after death, so all anyone can do is pack as much as possible into each day they have. This is not a particularly hopeful message. Brian is essentially saying that life is meaningless, so you might as well enjoy the meaningless moments while you can. Stewie accepts this answer, at least temporarily. He decides to become a singer and songwriter. Brian pauses when Stewie announces this plan. When Stewie notices the pause and asks about it, Brian agrees to listen to Stewie perform. But when Stewie actually starts singing, Brian cannot handle how bad it is. He tells Stewie to just kill himself after all. The episode treats this as a joke, but it reinforces the underlying nihilism. Even the moments of trying to find meaning or purpose are pointless and painful. The most important episode showing Stewie's adult-level nihilism is Brian and Stewie from Season 8. This episode is unusual because it features only 2 characters and takes place entirely in one location. Brian and Stewie get locked inside a bank vault over a weekend. The vault door closes automatically at the end of the workday on Friday. It will not open again until Monday morning. They are trapped together with no way to communicate with the outside world. During their time in the vault, Brian and Stewie have several deep conversations about life and meaning. At one point, they get drunk together on scotch that Brian had stored in his safety deposit box. While drunk, Stewie and Brian discuss Caesar Milan, who is known as the Dog Whisperer. Brian explains that he is inspired by Milan's philosophy about dogs having an instinctive ability to live in the present with purpose. Stewie immediately points out that Brian himself does not appear to live with any specific purpose. This observation enrages Brian. He starts insulting Stewie. Stewie retaliates by revealing that he could have gone all day without getting his diaper changed. He only asked Brian to change it because he sees Brian as just a passing amusement and the best of a bad situation. The 2 friends insult each other cruelly while drunk. The next morning, after they sober up and eat energy bars that Stewie had in his bag, Stewie asks Brian why he has a gun in his safety deposit box. This is a serious question with a shocking answer. Brian is known for supporting gun control. He cried after the Columbine massacre. He seems like the last person who would own a firearm. But when pressed, Brian admits the truth about the gun. Brian keeps the gun in case he ever wants to commit suicide. He clarifies that he did not come to the bank planning to kill himself that day. He only came to deposit money in his Christmas savings account, but he keeps the gun available as an option for the future. The scotch bottle was intended to be his last drink before using the gun. Brian explains that because of his anthropomorphism, he cannot find his purpose in life like other dogs can. Normal dogs are content being dogs. Brian is too intelligent and aware to find that kind of simple purpose. He finds comfort in knowing that he has the option to end his life whenever existence becomes too unbearable. Stewie is visibly shocked by this revelation. This is a baby hearing that his best friend keeps a gun specifically for suicide. Brian has just admitted that he finds life so meaningless and painful that he maintains a plan to escape it permanently. This is not a joke or a passing comment. Brian genuinely believes that his life has no purpose and that suicide is a reasonable response to that lack of purpose. Stewie's response to Brian's confession reveals his own philosophy about meaning and existence. Despite being shocked, Stewie tells Brian that he would be lost without him. He admits that his earlier statement about Brian being just a passing amusement was said out of anger and retaliation for Brian's insults. The truth is that Brian is the only person in the world that Stewie really cares about. Stewie loves Brian, not in a romantic or sexual way, but as one person loves another person whom they simply cannot do without. Then Stewie offers his own answer to the question of life's meaning. He tells Brian that maybe making someone else happy is enough purpose for a life. Maybe you do not need some grand cosmic significance. Maybe giving another person's life meaning is sufficient. That might be the greatest gift one friend can give another. Stewie is saying that life has no inherent meaning, but you can create meaning through relationships and through the impact you have on other people. This is still a fundamentally nihilistic worldview. Stewie is not arguing that life has objective meaning or that there is some grand plan. He is saying that in a meaningless universe, the only meaning available is the meaning you construct for yourself through your connections to others.
This is existentialism rather than pure nihilism, but it starts from the same place. The universe has no meaning. Death is final. Nothing matters except what you decide matters. Brian accepts this answer. He tells Stewie that he loves him too.
The episode ends with Brian reading the beginning of David Copperfield to Stewie as Stewie falls asleep. When the vault finally opens the next morning, Brian carries a sleeping Stewie out. Nothing has changed externally.
They are still trapped in their same lives, but they have found a fragile meaning in each other that makes existence slightly more bearable. The episode is remarkable because it completely abandons the usual Family Guy format. There are no cutaway gags, there is no music, there are no other characters. It is just a 1-year-old baby and a talking dog having an extended conversation about suicide, depression, and the meaning of life.
For 30 minutes, the show becomes a philosophical examination of whether existence has any point at all. What makes Stewie's nihilism so disturbing is that he is a baby experiencing these thoughts. Adults who question the meaning of life have usually lived through disappointments and failures that lead them to doubt. They have seen enough of the world to become cynical. But Stewie is 1 year old. He has barely started experiencing life, and he is already asking whether any of it matters. He has already concluded that death is inevitable, meaning is absent, and the only purpose available is whatever temporary purpose you can create through relationships that will also end in death. Stewie does not arrive at these conclusions gradually through experience. He seems to have been born with this adult-level awareness of mortality and meaninglessness. When he learns that he will die someday, he immediately understands all the implications. He does not need years of life to teach him that death makes everything temporary and potentially pointless. He grasps it instantly and completely. His first response is to try ending his life immediately, rather than waiting decades for the inevitable. This represents a twisted version of intelligence. Stewie is smart enough to understand death and meaninglessness, but he lacks the emotional maturity or life experience to cope with these realizations. He can ask all the right philosophical questions, but he has no framework for dealing with the answers. When religious institutions cannot give him satisfying answers about death, he does not develop faith or accept mystery. He just moves directly to suicide attempts. The show treats Stewie's existential crisis as both genuine and comedic. The suicide attempts are shown as darkly funny because they keep failing in absurd ways. But underneath the humor is a real examination of nihilistic philosophy. Stewie is genuinely asking whether life has meaning. Brian is genuinely admitting that he keeps a suicide plan because he cannot find purpose. These are not throwaway jokes. They are actual philosophical positions being explored through cartoon characters. Stewie represents what might happen if you gave adult-level intelligence and awareness to someone without any of the coping mechanisms or defense mechanisms that adults develop. He sees through all the comfortable lies that people tell themselves. He recognizes that death is final, and that nothing anyone does will matter in the long run. He understands that all achievement is temporary, and all relationships will end. But he has no way to deal with this knowledge except through despair and suicide attempts. The fact that Stewie is a baby makes this even more tragic. Babies are supposed to be innocent and carefree. They are not supposed to lie awake at night, terrified of their own mortality. They are not supposed to understand that existence is temporary and potentially meaningless. But Stewie does understand these things. He thinks about them constantly. He asks the same questions that keep depressed adults awake at night. And he does this while still needing someone to change his diaper. Stewie's nihilism is not just intellectual, it affects his behavior and his relationships. When he tells Brian that maybe giving someone else purpose is enough, he is creating a fragile justification for continuing to exist. Without Brian, Stewie would have no reason to keep living. Brian gives Stewie's life whatever meaning it has. This is an enormous burden to place on a friendship, especially when that friendship is between a baby and a dog who also struggles with suicidal thoughts. Family Guy uses Stewie to explore dark philosophical questions that most comedies avoid. Through this 1-year-old character, the show asks whether life has meaning, whether death makes everything pointless, and whether relationships can create purpose in a meaningless universe. Stewie does not provide easy answers to these questions. Instead, he experiences the full weight of existential dread
while still being young enough to need a teddy bear for comfort. He is a baby philosopher asking adult questions and finding that the answers are just as bleak as any pessimistic adult would discover. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Next up, Brian repeatedly exploits women emotionally, only to abandon them once responsibility appears, especially when children are involved. Brian repeatedly exploits women emotionally, then abandons them once responsibility appears, especially when children are involved. Brian Griffin is a talking dog who claims to be sensitive, intellectual, and respectful toward women. He says he values intelligence and personality over physical appearance. He presents himself as the kind of partner who truly understands and appreciates women on a deeper level than most men. But his actual behavior tells a completely different story. Throughout the series, Brian has repeatedly used women for emotional validation and physical gratification, then abandoned them the moment any real responsibility or commitment appeared. His pattern of behavior reveals someone who exploits women emotionally while avoiding any consequences for his actions. The clearest example of Brian abandoning responsibility when children are involved happens in the episode The Former Life of Brian from Season 6. Brian visits an old girlfriend named Tracy Flanagan. When he knew Tracy years earlier, she was attractive. When Brian visits her again, she has become overweight and lives in poor conditions. Brian is visibly disgusted and wants to leave immediately. But Tracy stops him and reveals shocking news. She has a 13-year-old son named Dylan. Brian is the father. Brian left Tracy before Dylan was born. He abandoned her while she was pregnant. He never checked on her, he never sent money, he never asked if she needed help. For 13 years, Dylan grew up without a father because Brian walked away from responsibility. Tracy raised their son completely alone. Dylan became an unruly teenager with behavior problems, likely because he never had a father figure in his life. Brian only learned he had a son when he happened to visit Tracy years later, looking for companionship because he felt lonely about love. When Tracy reveals that Dylan exists, Brian does not immediately take responsibility. He goes back to the Griffin house and complains to Peter and Lois about the situation. He treats having a son as an inconvenience rather than as a serious responsibility he abandoned. Tracy eventually drops Dylan off at the Griffin house so Brian can finally raise his own child. Dylan arrives and begins causing chaos in the house. He tears everything apart, he attacks people, he acts hostile toward everyone, including Brian. Brian's first response to his troubled son is to kick him out. He tries to abandon Dylan again, just like he abandoned Tracy 13 years earlier. Brian only starts bonding with Dylan when they discover they both smoke marijuana. They get high together and find common ground. Only then does Brian decide to take responsibility. But this decision comes 13 years too late. Dylan spent his entire childhood without a father because Brian chose to walk away from responsibility. Even more disturbing is an incident where Brian literally lets a woman and her child die because he does not want the responsibility of being involved with someone who has children. In one episode, Brian gets a hernia. When asked how it happened, he explains that he was performing an act of heroism. The flashback shows a woman trapped in a car that is sliding toward the ocean. Brian tries to help her. He grabs onto the car and tries to pull it back from the edge. But then the woman mentions that she has a baby with her in the car. The moment Brian hears that she has a child, his entire attitude changes. A child means responsibility. A child means this woman is likely married, or at least has serious parental obligations. Brian does not want to be involved with a woman who has those kinds of responsibilities. So instead of saving her, Brian lets go of the car. He releases his grip and allows the car to roll into the ocean with the woman and her baby inside. Both of them drowned to death because Brian decided they were not worth saving once he learned about the child. This is not an accident. This is not a mistake. Brian makes a conscious choice to let a woman and her infant child die rather than help someone with parental responsibilities. He values his preference for childless women over human life. The show plays this for dark comedy, but the underlying message is clear. Brian will abandon anyone the moment responsibility appears, even if it means letting them die. Brian's longest relationship was with a woman named Jillian Russell. Jillian is attractive but intellectually challenged. She is portrayed as a stereotypical dumb blonde who believes things like Hitler is still alive and that lemons are killed to make lemonade. Brian dates Jillian for an extended period starting in season 5, but from the very beginning, Brian is ashamed of this relationship. He hides Jillian from his family because he is embarrassed that she is not intelligent.
When Stewie finally meets Jillian, he immediately realizes why Brian was hiding her. She is not smart. Brian admits to Stewie that the relationship is based purely on sex. He knows he should break up with her because they have nothing in common intellectually. Stewie encourages Brian to end the relationship. Brian goes to Jillian's apartment, intending to break up with her. But when she answers the door wearing only a towel, Brian's self-control disappears. Instead of breaking up with her, he has sex with her. He returns to Stewie's car 3 hours later, having completely failed to end the relationship. This pattern continues throughout their time together. Brian stays with Jillian not because he loves her or values her as a person, but because he finds her physically attractive. He uses her for sex while looking down on her intelligence. He never treats her as an equal. He never values her personality or character. She is an object to him. When they eventually try to move in together, Brian discovers he cannot afford to pay their rent. He is financially irresponsible and has no plan for supporting them as a couple. Stewie shows up and offers to pay their rent if Brian lets him stay with them. Brian agrees without telling Jillian the truth. Jillian later discovers from Stewie that he has been paying their rent the whole time. She also learns that Brian did not really want to move in with her in the first place. He only agreed because of the physical relationship. When Jillian realizes Brian was not genuinely committed to building a life with her, she runs away crying. The relationship ends because Brian was never emotionally invested. He was using her and lying about his intentions. Later, Jillian moves on and gets engaged to a man named Derek Wilcox. Derek is described as perfect in every way. He speaks multiple languages, he is naturally athletic, he is successful and kind. Brian becomes jealous when he learns Jillian is marrying someone better than him. He crashes Jillian's wedding to declare his love for her. But Jillian gently tells Brian that he had his chance and he blew it. She has moved on. She deserves someone who values her for who she is, not someone who used her for sex while being ashamed of her. Another example of Brian abandoning a woman when responsibility appears happens with a woman named Rita in the episode Brian's Got a Brand New Bag from season 8. Brian meets Rita when he goes to pick up her daughter for a date. The daughter has already left with someone else. Brian starts talking to Rita and finds himself attracted to her. Rita is 50 years old, significantly older than Brian. They begin dating, and Brian initially seems happy with her. But Brian is deeply insecure about the age difference. When he brings Rita to meet his family, they ridicule her behind her back for being old. They demand to know her age at dinner. Rita breaks down and admits she is 50. The family makes her feel unwelcome and judged. Brian responds by proposing to Rita, seemingly out of spite to prove his family wrong rather than genuine love. Rita accepts the proposal, but then she breaks her hip while having sex with Brian. She becomes bedridden and needs care. This is the moment when responsibility appears. Brian needs to take care of his injured fiancée. He needs to support her while she recovers. Instead, Brian goes out to pick up medicine for her. On the way, he sees a group of young women entering a bar. One of them offers to have sex with Brian in the bathroom. Brian accepts the offer. He abandons his bedridden fiancée, who is waiting at home in pain for her medicine. He has sex with a stranger in a bar bathroom while Rita suffers alone. When Brian finally returns with the medicine, he admits his infidelity to Rita. She decides to break off the engagement because Brian is too young and immature to handle real responsibility. The moment Rita needed him to be a caring partner, Brian chose his own physical desires instead. Throughout the series, multiple characters call out Brian's behavior toward women. The most memorable criticism comes from Glenn Quagmire in the episode Jerome is the New Black from season 8. Quagmire delivers a long speech explaining exactly why he hates Brian. He points out that Brian constantly hits on Lois, even though she is married to Peter, who rescued Brian from certain death and pays for everything Brian owns. Quagmire notes that Brian is a sponge who never pays for anything and always says he will pay people back later, but later never comes. Most importantly, Quagmire calls out Brian's treatment of women. He says Brian pretends to be deep and claims to love women for their souls, but in reality, Brian only dates attractive women with no substance. Quagmire admits that he dates women for their bodies, but at least he is honest about it. Brian pretends to be intellectual and sensitive, but it is all an act to manipulate women into sleeping with him. Quagmire also specifically mentions that Brian is not part of his son Dylan's life,
highlighting Brian's pattern of avoiding parental responsibility. Brian's manipulation of women often involves lying about who he is and what he wants. He pretends to be a successful writer, even though he has never finished his novel. He pretends to be cultured and sophisticated, even though he is shallow and insecure. He uses intellectual conversation and references to literature to make women think he is deep and thoughtful. But once he gets what he wants physically, his interest disappears. In multiple episodes, Brian dates women by pretending to be something he is not. He lies about his accomplishments, he exaggerates his career success, he acts like he wants a meaningful relationship when he only wants sex. When the women discover the truth about who Brian really is, they leave him. But Brian never learns from these experiences. He continues using the same manipulative tactics because they sometimes work. The pattern is always the same. Brian meets a woman. He presents himself as sensitive and intellectual. He says he values personality over appearance. The woman believes him and starts a relationship with him. Brian enjoys the relationship as long as it remains superficial and fun. But the moment any real responsibility appears, whether it is a child, an injury, financial commitment, or emotional vulnerability, Brian abandons the woman and moves on to the next target. Brian left Tracy pregnant and alone for 13 years before ever meeting his son. He let a woman and her baby drown rather than help someone with children. He used Jillian for sex while being ashamed of her intelligence. He cheated on Rita when she needed him to care for her injury. Every single time a woman needed Brian to step up and be responsible, he chose himself instead. He chose his comfort, his desires, and his freedom over the well-being of the women he claimed to care about. The show presents Brian as smarter and more cultured than the other characters. He reads books, he discusses politics, he listens to jazz. But his intelligence makes his behavior toward women even worse. He knows better. He understands that his actions hurt people. He is fully aware that abandoning his pregnant girlfriend and his infant son was wrong. He knows that letting people die because they have children is monstrous. He understands that using women for sex while pretending to love them is manipulative. He just does not care enough to change his behavior. Brian represents a particular type of man who uses progressive language and intellectual interests to disguise deeply selfish and exploitative behavior. He talks about respecting women while treating them as disposable. He claims to value depth and substance while only pursuing physical relationships. He presents himself as a victim of circumstances when he is actually the person creating those circumstances through his own choices. Every failed relationship is blamed on the woman or on bad timing, never on Brian's refusal to commit or take responsibility. The most damaging aspect of Brian's behavior is that he genuinely believes he is a good person. He thinks his interests in literature and politics make him morally superior to others. He views himself as misunderstood rather than as someone who repeatedly hurts people. When women leave him, he sees it as their failure to appreciate him rather than as consequences of his own actions. This complete lack of self-awareness prevents him from ever growing or changing. Brian Griffin is not the voice of reason the show sometimes pretends he is. He is a manipulative person who exploits women emotionally and abandons them when responsibility appears. He uses intelligence and culture as weapons to make women trust him, then betrays that trust when it becomes inconvenient. His pattern of behavior has destroyed relationships, hurt countless women, and left his own child to grow up without a father. Despite claiming to be better than everyone else, Brian's treatment of women reveals him to be selfish, cowardly, and deeply dishonest about who he really is. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, Brian sees himself as an intellectual, yet the show repeatedly confirms that his writing career is objectively terrible, with publishers and critics openly mocking his work. Brian considers himself an intellectual, yet the show confirms his writing career is objectively terrible, with publishers openly mocking his work. Brian Griffin sees himself as an intellectual. He reads The New Yorker. He listens to jazz. He discusses politics and literature. He considers himself more cultured and sophisticated than everyone around him. A major part of this intellectual identity is his belief that he is a talented writer. For years, Brian told everyone he was working on a novel that would establish him as a serious author. He spoke about his writing career with absolute confidence, as if success was inevitable once he finished his book. But the show repeatedly and explicitly confirms that Brian's writing is objectively terrible. Publishers have mocked his work. Critics have called it the worst they have ever read. His novel sold 0 copies and holds the record as the worst-selling book in history. The gap between how Brian sees himself and the actual quality of his writing is enormous and embarrassing.
Brian's first major writing project was a novel called Faster Than the Speed of Love. He worked on this book for approximately 9 years, though he spent most of that time procrastinating rather than actually writing. The show established this running joke early in the series. Stewie would periodically ask Brian about his progress on the novel in an increasingly high-pitched voice. He would ask questions like whether Brian had a nice little narrative with a beginning, middle, and end. He would ask if some friends become enemies and some enemies become friends. He would ask if at the end, the main character is richer from the experience. These questions mocked the cliché and predictable nature of what Brian was writing. When Brian finally revealed the title of his novel to Lois in the episode Movin' Out from season 5, she immediately started laughing. She told him directly that Faster Than the Speed of Love was the worst title she had ever heard. Brian was offended, but Lois could not stop laughing at how terrible the title was. This was the first clear indication that Brian's novel was not the masterpiece he believed it to be. His own family member found the title so bad it was hilarious. The plot of Faster Than the Speed of Love makes the title look good by comparison. Brian described the story to Lois, and she immediately recognized that he had stolen the entire plot from the Iron Eagle movie series. The story involves a boy who has to gather old World War II pilots to help rescue his father. This is the exact plot of Iron Eagle 3. Brian claimed he had never seen the Iron Eagle movies, but the similarities were too obvious to be coincidental. He either unconsciously plagiarized the movies, or he was lying about having seen them. Either way, his novel had no originality whatsoever. Brian finally got Faster Than the Speed of Love published in the episode 420 from season 7. But the publication only happened because Brian made a deal with Lois's father, Carter Pewterschmidt. Carter wanted marijuana to be illegal again after Brian had helped get it legalized. Carter offered to publish Brian's novel if Brian would publicly perform a song convincing people that marijuana should be made illegal again. Brian sold out his principles for the chance to see his book in print. With Stewie encouraging him to take the deal, Brian agreed. Carter published 2 million copies of the novel and even got Oprah Winfrey to endorse it with an Oprah's Book Club sticker on the cover. Despite having 2 million copies printed, and despite having Oprah's endorsement, Faster Than the Speed of Love did not sell a single copy. Not one person bought the book. Tom Tucker reported on the news that Brian's novel had set a record as the worst-selling novel of all time. The book was universally panned by literary critics. They called it mediocre, poorly written, and unreadable. Every professional reviewer who looked at the book said it was terrible. There was no disagreement among critics. The consensus was absolute. Brian's novel was objectively bad. The failure of Faster Than the Speed of Love reached its peak in the episode Brian Writes a Bestseller from season 9. Brian received approximately 300 boxes in the mail containing all the unsold copies of his book. His publisher was returning every single copy because none of them sold. But the humiliation went even further than that. When Stewie opened one of the boxes, he discovered that the books were packed using shredded pieces of Brian's book. The publisher had taken additional copies of Faster Than the Speed of Love and shredded them to use as packing material for the boxes containing the other unsold copies. There were so many unsold books that they needed to destroy some of them just to have enough packing material to ship the rest back. The Griffin family also used the failed books as packing material for their own packages. In multiple episodes, when someone in the family needed to pack a box, they would stuff it with shredded pages from Brian's novel. His failed book became useful only as garbage to fill empty space in shipping boxes. This running joke emphasized how worthless the book was. It had no value as literature. It had no value as a product. Its only function was as trash. When Brian saw the 300 boxes of his failed novel piled up in the Griffin house, he announced that he was finished with writing. He declared that he was not meant to be a writer and that he was giving up. The failure was so complete and so humiliating that even Brian could not deny it anymore. Receiving hundreds of boxes of your own unsold book, packaged in shredded copies of that same book, is the kind of failure that cannot be rationalized or excused. But Brian did not stay away from writing for long. While reading the New York Times, he noticed that a self-help book was at the top of the bestseller list. Brian became angry about this. He declared that self-help books were garbage,
and that anyone could write one. Stewie suggested that Brian should write his own self-help book to prove his point. Brian initially resisted, but Stewie made a compelling argument. Brian did not care about self-help books, so it did not matter if the book was bad. He cared about Faster Than the Speed of Love, which is why its failure hurt. But he could write a terrible self-help book without any emotional investment. Brian decided to write a self-help book specifically to prove that the genre was worthless and that people would buy anything. He titled the book Wish It, Want It, Do It, and wrote the entire thing in approximately 3 hours. The book was intentionally terrible. Brian started by asking readers to think about their biggest dreams and goals. Then he provided 50 blank pages for readers to write out their own desires. He designed the book to make readers do all the work themselves while giving him credit for their efforts. The book contained almost no actual content from Brian. It was a scam disguised as self-help advice. When Stewie got the book published through his connections, Brian's initial reaction was to say that Wish It, Want It, Do It was the worst thing he had ever written. He knew it was garbage. He admitted it was garbage. But the book became a massive commercial success anyway. People loved it. It flew to the top of the bestseller lists. Brian suddenly became a famous author. He hired Stewie as his publicist and went on a publicity tour. The success of his terrible self-help book did something revealing to Brian's character. Even though he knew the book was garbage, once he saw people praising it, he started believing his own hype. He began acting like Wish It, Want It, Do It was actually brilliant and profound. He started treating people badly because of his fame. He became arrogant and insufferable. He fired Stewie after Stewie made a mistake with dinner reservations. Brian's ego inflated so much that he could not see reality anymore. The reality check came when Stewie booked Brian an appearance on Real Time with Bill Maher. On the show, Bill Maher and the other panelists, including Ariana Huffington and Dana Gould, began criticizing Brian's book. They said it did not meet public expectations. They called it shallow, repetitive, and banal. These were professional intellectuals telling Brian directly that his work was worthless. At first, Brian tried to defend the book, but he could not argue against their points because they were correct. Eventually, Brian confessed the truth on live television. He admitted that he wrote Wish It, Want It, Do It in a single day. He said he wrote it because he believed people would buy anything if it claimed to be self-help. He called his own book crap. Bill Maher responded with disgust. He told Brian that a real writer would stand by their work no matter what others think. A real writer would defend their writing even if critics attacked it. But Brian could not defend his book because he knew it was terrible. He had admitted it was terrible before it became successful, and now he was admitting it again on national television. The humiliation was so intense that Brian urinated himself on the set of Real Time with Bill Maher. He literally lost control of his bladder from the stress and embarrassment of being exposed as a fraud. Bill Maher chased him off the program with a newspaper like Brian was a badly behaved dog. Brian had presented himself as a sophisticated intellectual writer, and he ended up being treated like an animal who had an accident on the floor. After the Bill Maher disaster, Brian tried to apologize to Stewie. But even in his apology, Brian could not take full responsibility. He blamed Stewie for being in over his head. He blamed Stewie for the mistakes that led to his humiliation. Stewie called him out on this. He asked Brian why the apology was turning into a list of things Stewie did wrong. Brian could not even apologize without trying to deflect blame onto others. At the end of the episode, Stewie remarked that Brian cannot write. This was not an insult or a joke. It was a statement of fact confirmed by everything that had happened. Other characters throughout the series have directly told Brian that his writing is terrible. Glenn Quagmire, during his famous rant about why he hates Brian in the episode Jerome is the New Black from season 8, specifically mentioned that Brian is a terrible writer. Quagmire listed this among all the other reasons he finds Brian insufferable. It was not a minor complaint. It was a core part of why Quagmire cannot stand Brian's pretentious attitude. In the episode A Woman Walks Into a Bar, Brian's novel received an award for special literary excellence. Brian was briefly excited until he discovered the award came from a group of mentally disabled people. The show used this as a joke to emphasize how bad Brian's writing is. The only people who thought his novel deserved an award were people who could not properly evaluate literature. This was cruel humor, but it reinforced the message that Brian's work has no actual literary merit. Brian also briefly worked for the New Yorker magazine. This is mentioned as something that happened in the past. Brian was invited to write for the New Yorker, which is one of the most prestigious publications for writers in America. This should have been a major achievement and validation of his talent.
But Brian was fired once the magazine learned he did not graduate from college. His lack of credentials cost him the job. The show never suggests that Brian lost the job because of the quality of his writing,
But the fact that he only briefly worked there before being fired reinforces the pattern of failure in his writing career. Throughout the series, Stewie has repeatedly mocked Brian's novel. He asks Brian the same questions about his progress, using an increasingly high-pitched and sarcastic voice. These questions appear in multiple episodes, including Flights of Disaster, A Star is Born, kind of, and Brian Goes Back to College. The repetition of this joke emphasizes how long Brian spent working on a book that turned out to be worthless. 9 years of work resulted in the worst-selling novel in history. 9 years of talking about being a serious writer resulted in a book so bad it was used as packing material. Brian's self-image as an intellectual and a writer is completely divorced from reality. He believes he is talented. He believes he is sophisticated. He believes his work has value. But every objective measure proves him wrong. Publishers reject him or return his unsold books. Critics universally pan his work. The reading public refuses to buy his novel, even with Oprah's endorsement. When he deliberately writes garbage, it becomes successful, but only because people do not recognize it as garbage until Bill Maher points it out on television. The tragedy of Brian's character is that his intellectual pretensions prevent him from seeing the truth about himself. He could potentially improve as a writer if he accepted that his current work is bad and that he needs to learn and grow. But Brian cannot accept criticism. When people tell him his writing is terrible, he gets defensive. He makes excuses. He blames others. He never takes responsibility for the fact that his work is objectively bad. Brian's writing career is a perfect example of the Dunning-Kruger effect. He has such confidence in his abilities that he cannot recognize his lack of actual skill. He surrounds himself with the trappings of intellectualism. He reads important books. He discusses serious topics. He uses sophisticated vocabulary, but none of this makes him a good writer. Reading good books does not automatically make you able to write good books. Talking about literature does not mean you understand how to create it. The show uses Brian's failed writing career as an ongoing source of humor, but underneath the jokes is a serious point about self-awareness and honesty. Brian lies to himself about his abilities. He refuses to see what everyone else can see clearly. His novel is terrible. His self-help book is garbage. His intellectual pretensions are a facade covering up genuine lack of talent. The gap between his self-image and reality is so wide that it becomes funny, but it is also kind of sad. Brian could be a better person if he could just accept the truth about himself. But he never will. He will continue to see himself as an unrecognized genius whose brilliance the world is too dumb to appreciate, even as box after box of his unsold books arrives at his door. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Next up, Meg has been psychologically conditioned to believe that absorbing abuse is what keeps the family stable, a role she ultimately and consciously accepts. Meg has been psychologically conditioned to believe that absorbing abuse keeps the family stable, a role she consciously accepts. Meg Griffin is the oldest child in the Griffin family. She attends high school. She tries to fit in with other teenagers. She wants to be accepted and loved by her family. But instead of receiving normal parental support and sibling companionship, Meg has been subjected to years of psychological and physical abuse from every member of her household. The disturbing reality is that Meg has become consciously aware of her role as the family scapegoat. She understands that her family uses her to absorb their dysfunction, and in a heartbreaking display of psychological conditioning, she has accepted this role because she believes it keeps the family from completely falling apart. The abuse Meg experiences is constant and comes from all directions. Her father, Peter, treats her worse than anyone else in the family. He insults her appearance repeatedly. He tells her she is ugly and unwanted. In the very first episode of the series, Death Has a Shadow, Peter grounded Meg for touching the thermostat. When Meg got collagen lip injections that deformed her face, Lois said she deserved it and refused to help her fix the problem. In the second episode, I Never Met the Dead Man, Peter told Meg directly that her birth was a disappointment. This established from the very beginning that Meg was unwanted. Peter physically abuses Meg throughout the series. He farts in her face repeatedly, treating this as entertainment. In multiple episodes, including Bango Was His Name-O, Peter traps Meg in enclosed spaces and farts on her deliberately.
In Call Girl, Peter's parting gift to Meg is farting slowly in her face. He throws objects at her. He sold Meg to the Goldman family in one episode, treating his daughter like property he could get rid of.
Peter once asked God to remove Meg from existence entirely. He makes jokes at her expense constantly. When other people insult Meg, Peter agrees with them and encourages it. Lois, who should protect her daughter as a mother, instead participates in the abuse. In Wasted Talent, Lois forced Meg to practice piano by attaching an ankle bracelet connected to an iron ball, physically restraining her like a prisoner. When Meg tried to ask Peter for help, Lois forcibly restrained her to prevent her from escaping. In Model Misbehavior, when Meg compared her bedroom to Lois's childhood bedroom, Lois pointed out that her room had been filled with trophies and pictures of friends, making Meg feel inadequate about having neither accomplishments nor friendships. In Peter's Daughter, Meg told Lois that she loved her. Lois said nothing in response. She could not even say she loved her own daughter back. In Steroids, Meg was having a difficult time at school. For lunch, Meg received food waste like peels and crusts, along with a taunting picture of Lois eating a turkey leg. When Meg struggled, Lois gave up on her completely. She handed Meg a bottle of pills and a Sylvia Plath book, then told her, "Whatever happens, happens." Sylvia Plath was a poet who died by suicide. Lois was essentially suggesting that if Meg killed herself, Lois would not care. Chris, Meg's younger brother, joins in the abuse despite being her sibling. He tells her to shut up. He insults her constantly. He calls her names. In Stuck Together, Torn Apart, the entire family gathered in Meg's bedroom to read her diary out loud and laugh at her private thoughts and feelings. This is a massive violation of privacy and trust. They treated her innermost thoughts as entertainment, mocking her for having normal teenage emotions and insecurities. The family actively avoids spending time with Meg. In Jungle Love, the show explicitly depicted the Griffins avoiding her company. They do not want to be around her, they do not invite her to activities, they make plans that deliberately exclude her. Even Brian, who initially seemed to treat Meg with more decency than the others, began participating in her mistreatment in later seasons. He refused to comfort her when she needed emotional support. He found humor in her being humiliated. He deliberately urinated on her bed in one episode. Stewie occasionally shows disdain for Meg as well, though he sometimes softens toward her. This abuse is not occasional. It is relentless. It happens every single day. Meg cannot escape it. She lives in a house where every person treats her with contempt. Her own family members, the people who are supposed to love and protect her, instead use her as an emotional punching bag. They take out their frustrations on her. They blame her for problems she did not cause. They insult her when they are having bad days. Meg absorbs all of this abuse without fighting back most of the time. The most disturbing revelation about Meg's situation came in the season 10 episode Seahorse Seashell Party. This episode aired on October 2nd, 2011. During a hurricane, the Griffin family is stuck inside the house together. They try to pass time by playing games. Unable to keep themselves entertained, they take their frustrations out on Meg as usual. Peter hums the theme from Indiana Jones in The Last Crusade. When Meg opens a soda can, Peter snaps at her and says the sound is annoying. Lois tells Meg not to talk to her father like that. Chris tells Meg to shut up. But this time, Meg does not accept the abuse quietly. Having had enough after years of mistreatment, Meg finally snaps. She turns on her family and tells them exactly what she thinks of each of them. She starts with Chris. She tells him he is a terrible brother. She says he treats her like he hates her. She points out that he says hurtful things to her constantly. She explains that brothers are supposed to support their sisters, but Chris always sides against her. He joins Peter and Lois in tearing her down instead of defending her. When Lois tries to interrupt and tell Meg to stop, Meg turns on her mother. She brings up Lois's entire criminal past. She mentions that Lois was a shoplifter, a drug addict, a porn star, and someone who had sexual encounters with Gene Simmons and Bill Clinton. Meg points out the hypocrisy of Lois judging her when Lois has done terrible things. Meg tells Lois that she claims to be a better person now because of those experiences, but then asks the devastating question, "Are you actually a better person?" Meg continues her criticism of Lois as a mother. She tells Lois that from the moment she was born, Meg had to trust her. She had no choice.
She needed Lois to protect her from the world, to guide her, to help her navigate the difficult and vulnerable journey to becoming a person. But Lois has done none of those things. Meg tells her mother directly that she took a child's trust and smashed it into bits in a 17-year-long mission to destroy something she killed a long time ago. This speech reduces Lois to tears. Lois admits that Meg is right and that she is a terrible mother. Then Meg confronts Peter. She calls him fat, lazy, and abusive. She describes him as a blue-collar Irish Catholic dad who drinks way too much and barely makes enough money to support his family. She tells him he has lived half his life and has nothing to show for it. His only arguable accomplishments are his children, and she points out that all of them are disasters. She tells Peter he is completely selfish and totally irresponsible as a father. She says he has no education and no interests. He just does whatever reckless thing he wants to do whenever he wants to do it, without regard for anyone else. When he is not terrorizing the community with his impulsive behavior, he is being a total jerk to his family. Meg points out that Peter would go to prison if anyone saw his treatment of her. Peter initially does not understand that Meg is criticizing him. He thinks she is amusing. But when Meg calls him a waste of a man, Peter finally realizes he is being insulted. He becomes shocked and demands that Lois make Meg stop. But Lois refuses because Peter did not stand up for her when Meg was criticizing her. This leads to the entire family turning on each other. Peter, Lois, and Chris begin heaping abusive criticisms on one another. They point out each other's flaws. They insult each other viciously. Peter eventually runs upstairs, crying. This leaves Meg alone with Brian, who has been hallucinating on magic mushrooms throughout the episode. Brian compliments Meg for standing up for herself. He tells her that what she did was incredibly brave and mature. But then, Meg has a realization that changes everything. She asks Brian a question. She asks if he thinks it is possible that the family cannot survive without some sort of lightning rod to absorb all the dysfunction. Brian admits that it is a theory. Meg continues explaining her thought process. She says it is not ideal, but it is an important piece that maybe it is just her lot in life to provide. She says that maybe if she feels bad, the rest of the family does not have to feel bad. Brian responds by telling Meg that what she is saying is incredibly noble and mature. He says he thinks Meg might be the strongest person in the house. This conversation reveals the psychological conditioning that has shaped Meg's entire worldview. She has internalized the abuse to such a degree that she believes it serves a necessary function. She has convinced herself that by absorbing all the family's dysfunction, anger, and cruelty, she prevents them from turning on each other. She sees herself as a sacrifice that keeps the family together. Without someone to blame and abuse, the family members would destroy each other with their criticism and hostility. Meg believes that her suffering has purpose. She believes it protects her family from themselves. Armed with this realization, Meg goes upstairs to apologize. She tells Peter, Lois, and Chris that she was wrong. She says she was just taking her own problems out on them. She takes back everything she said. She restores their egos and their sense of superiority over her. The family hugs. The hurricane passes. Everything returns to normal. Meg continues being the scapegoat. The abuse continues. Nothing changes except that now Meg has articulated her understanding of why she must endure this treatment. This episode was heavily criticized by television reviewers precisely because of this ending. Kevin McFarland of the AV Club wrote that the show spent years going down the path of least resistance and simply joined the fan chorus of hatred toward Meg. He said one episode of pointed, forced justification for that shift does not change anything. Critics pointed out that the episodes seemed to justify abuse by suggesting that victims should stay in abusive situations for the benefit of their abusers. The moral of the episode appeared to be that Meg should continue suffering because her family needs someone to abuse in order to function properly. What makes this so disturbing is that Meg is correct in her analysis. When she stood up for herself and stopped accepting abuse, the family immediately fell apart. They could not handle treating each other the way they normally treat Meg. Peter, Lois, and Chris all have serious personal problems and personality flaws. They manage those problems by projecting their anger onto Meg instead of dealing with their own issues. Meg serves as a pressure release valve. When they feel bad about themselves, they make Meg feel worse. When they are frustrated or angry, they take it out on Meg. This allows them to avoid confronting their own failures and dysfunction. Meg has been psychologically conditioned from birth to accept this role. Her parents told her from day one that she was unwanted and disappointing. they established early that her needs and feelings do not matter. They taught her that her value comes from absorbing abuse without complaint. They reinforced this lesson every single day through constant criticism, physical mistreatment, emotional neglect, and social isolation. By the time Meg is a teenager, she has completely internalized the idea that she deserves this treatment and that it serves a greater purpose. This is textbook psychological abuse. Meg has been gaslit into believing that the abuse is necessary and even noble. She sees her own suffering as a form of strength rather than recognizing it as victimization. She has been conditioned to prioritize her abuser's well-being over her own safety and mental health. She believes that if she stops accepting abuse, her family will suffer. She has been trained to see herself as responsible for managing everyone else's emotions and dysfunction. The show presents this dynamic as comedy, but the underlying psychology is deeply disturbing. Meg genuinely believes that her lot in life is to be a lightning rod for her family's dysfunction. She has consciously accepted a role that requires her to endure constant psychological and physical abuse. She thinks this keeps her family stable, when in reality, it just enables them to avoid taking responsibility for their own behavior and mental health. Meg has been so thoroughly conditioned that she apologizes for standing up for herself and voluntarily returns to being abused. This is the tragic result of years of systematic psychological manipulation by the people who are supposed to love and protect her. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, when Meg is given power or confidence, she becomes just as cruel as the rest of her family, implying that the abuse shaped her personality rather than restrained it. When given power or confidence, Meg becomes just as cruel as her family, implying the abuse shaped her personality, not restrained it. Meg Griffin has been psychologically conditioned to accept her role as the family's scapegoat. She consciously understands that absorbing abuse keeps her family stable. But there is another disturbing pattern in Meg's behavior that reveals something even darker about what years of abuse have done to her personality. When Meg is given power, confidence, or authority over others, she does not use it to break the cycle of abuse. Instead, she becomes just as cruel and abusive as the people who hurt her. This suggests that the abuse did not simply restrain a naturally kind person. The abuse fundamentally shaped who Meg is, teaching her that cruelty is the natural response to having power over someone weaker. The clearest and most extreme example of this pattern appears in the Season 8 episode Dial Meg for Murder, which aired on January 31st, 2010. In this episode, Meg falls in love with a prison inmate named Luke, whom she met through a school pen pal project. When Luke escapes from prison during a riot, he hides in the Griffin house. Brian discovers Luke in Meg's room and alerts Peter. Peter calls Joe Swanson, who arrests both Luke and Meg. Meg is charged with harboring a fugitive and sent to prison for 3 months. When Meg returns from prison, she has completely transformed. She comes home with the attitude and appearance of a hardened criminal. She has a new thuggish look. She speaks differently. Her entire personality has changed. But the most significant change is how she treats her family. For the first time in her life, Meg has power. She learned in prison how to be violent and intimidating. She learned how to dominate others through fear. And she immediately uses these skills against the people who abused her for years. Meg's first target is Peter. She walks up to him and tells him directly that he is her bitch now. She then begins physically abusing Peter in ways that mirror exactly how Peter abused her throughout her childhood. Peter had spent years hitting Meg, throwing things at her, farting on her, and physically dominating her. Now Meg beats Peter senseless. She attacks him brutally and repeatedly. At one point, she curb stomps Peter, placing his head on the stairs and stomping on it with her foot, breaking his teeth. This scene deliberately references the infamous curb stomp scene from the movie American History X, one of the most brutal acts of violence ever depicted in film. But Meg does not stop at physical violence. She also sexually assaults Peter. In one scene, Meg joins Peter in the shower and rapes him with a loofah to assert her dominance. This is not played for laughs in the traditional sense. The episode makes clear that Meg is retaliating for years of abuse by inflicting the same kind of trauma on Peter that he inflicted on her. She has learned that power means the ability to hurt people who cannot fight back. Peter taught her this lesson through his treatment of her. Now she is applying what she learned. Meg also torments Lois. She uses Lois's shirts as toilet paper, deliberately destroying her mother's belongings as an act of disrespect and dominance. Meg keeps a poop bucket next to her bed and refuses to empty it until it gets full, forcing the family to live with the smell. When Lois asks her to use the toilet like everyone else, Meg refuses.
She tells Lois that she likes to fill up the bucket and she is not making a million trips. This forces Lois to endure disgusting and degrading conditions in her own home, just as Meg was forced to endure degrading treatment for years. At school, Meg uses her newfound confidence to attack the students who bullied her. She specifically targets Connie D'Amico and her friends, the popular girls who tormented Meg for years. Meg beats up several students, cracking 3 kids' skulls open. She hits them with a sack full of unopened soda cans, causing serious injuries. After beating Connie unconscious, Meg tongue kisses her, which is a form of sexual assault. Meg gets suspended from school for this violence, but she does not care. She has tasted power, and she enjoys using it to hurt people. Meg's violence escalates to the point where she decides to commit armed robbery. She ambushes Brian in his car and forces him at gunpoint to drive her to Mort's pharmacy so she can rob the store. She is prepared to commit a serious felony and potentially hurt or kill innocent people. She tells Brian that she does not care if she goes back to prison, because nobody cares about her anyway. Only when Brian shows her the article he wrote about her, describing her as far sweeter and kinder than the typical American girl, does Meg calm down and abandon her criminal plans. Brian's words touch her enough to make her drop her rebellious attitude and return home. The episode explicitly states, through Peter's dialogue, that the prison system took an innocent little girl and turned her into a psychotic, sociopathic freak. But this analysis misses the deeper truth. Meg was not innocent before prison. She had already been shaped by years of abuse from her family. What prison did was give her the tools and confidence to express the cruelty that her family had already taught her. She learned from Peter that the person with power gets to hurt people. She learned from Lois that mothers can be cruel and dismissive. She learned from Chris that siblings should gang up on the weakest person. Prison did not corrupt Meg. It simply gave her permission to behave the way her family had always behaved toward her. Another clear example of Meg's cruelty when given power appears in the season 11 episode Criss-Cross, which aired on February 17th, 2013. In this episode, Chris is teased at school for wearing cheap knockoff sneakers called Teslick. The commercial for these shoes mentions that each shoe is sold separately, emphasizing how poor the Griffin family is. Chris asks his parents for money to buy better shoes, but Lois turns him down. Desperate to fit in at school, Chris steals money from Lois's purse when his parents are out for the evening. Meg catches Chris in the act of stealing. Instead of telling their parents or having a conversation with Chris about why stealing is wrong, Meg sees an opportunity for power. She tells Chris that she will keep his secret only if he does whatever she asks. Chris agrees, thinking Meg will make reasonable requests. At first, Meg's demands are basic sibling stuff. She makes Chris do her homework and clean her room. These are annoying, but not particularly harmful tasks. But then Meg's requests become increasingly disturbing and criminal. She forces Chris to stalk outside Planned Parenthood clinics. She makes him take down the names of girls who go inside. Then she has Chris call these girls and deliver seriously messed up prank call material. This is not just mean sibling behavior. This is cruel harassment of vulnerable people. Meg is using Chris to psychologically torment girls who are already dealing with difficult situations. She finds pleasure in causing pain to people she does not even know. Meg also reveals to Chris that she is part of a group that vandalizes Anne Frank's house every year. Anne Frank was a Jewish girl who hid from the Nazis during the Holocaust and later died in a concentration camp. Her house is now a museum and memorial. Meg admits to participating in annual acts of vandalism against this memorial, showing deep disrespect for victims of genocide. This is particularly disturbing because Meg herself is half Jewish through Lois's side of the family. She is participating in anti-Semitic actions against her own heritage. When Chris asks Meg about why she has a post office box, she casually mentions her involvement in this vandalism as if it is no big deal. She does not show any remorse or awareness that what she is doing is morally wrong. She has normalized cruelty and criminal behavior to the point where she discusses it openly with her brother. Meg also tells Chris that she never intends to stop with her demands. She plans to blackmail him indefinitely, keeping him under her control forever. Chris becomes so desperate to escape Meg's abuse that he runs away from home and moves in with Herbert, the elderly neighbor who has inappropriate sexual interest in him. The fact that Chris would rather live with a potential predator than continue enduring Meg's blackmail shows how extreme her cruelty had become. When Herbert eventually kicks Chris out because he cannot handle living with him, Meg apologizes and admits she missed Chris. She tells him they need each other to cope with the family. But this reconciliation does not change the fact that when Meg had power over Chris, she used it to force him into criminal activities and subjected him to months of psychological abuse. In the Season 8 episode, Don't Make Me Over, Meg receives a makeover that makes her beautiful. The Griffin family becomes pop stars because of Meg's new appearance and singing talent. At first, things go well, but as Meg experiences fame and receives positive attention for the first time in her life, her personality changes. Her beauty and newfound fame go to her head. She becomes mean to her parents. She acts entitled and makes unreasonable demands of everyone around her. She treats people with the same dismissiveness and cruelty that people always showed her. The moment Meg has status and power, she becomes just as bad as the people who made her feel worthless. In The Hand That Rocks the Wheelchair, Meg acts as a temporary caregiver for Joe Swanson when his wife Bonnie visits her family. While caring for Joe, Meg interprets his basic kindness as romantic interest. Joe is simply being nice to her in ways her own family never is. But Meg's desperate need for affection causes her to misread the situation completely. She becomes obsessed with Joe and decides she wants to be with him permanently. To keep Bonnie away from Joe, Meg plants a gun in Bonnie's luggage at the airport. Bonnie gets arrested for trying to board a plane with a weapon. This is an extremely serious crime. Meg is willing to send an innocent woman to prison and destroy her life just so Meg can have access to Joe. Later that night, Meg inserts herself into the Swanson family life by breastfeeding Joe's daughter Susie in public, horrifying Joe. Meg is willing to commit crimes and violate boundaries in pursuit of what she wants. When she has the ability to act on her desires, she does so without regard for the harm she causes to others. Perhaps the most disturbing example of Meg's cruelty appears in the episode Friends Without Benefits. Meg develops a crush on a new boy at school named Kent. When she discovers that Kent is gay and has a crush on Chris, Meg decides to facilitate a sexual encounter between them. But Chris has no interest in Kent and refuses to participate. Instead of respecting Chris's boundaries, Meg obtains roofies from Quagmire. She plans to drug Chris into unconsciousness so that Kent can break into Chris's room and rape him while he is unable to consent or defend himself. Meg is literally planning to have her brother raped. She is willing to turn her crush into a rapist and her brother into a rape victim just to have some kind of connection to Kent. This goes far beyond sibling rivalry or typical teenage cruelty. This is planning a violent felony that would permanently traumatize Chris. Meg only abandons this plan when she sees the error of her ways at the last minute. But the fact that she planned it at all, obtained the drugs, and came close to going through with it reveals how warped her understanding of acceptable behavior has become. In The Heartbreak Dog, Meg and Chris steal belongings from elderly people at a nursing home. They rob vulnerable people who cannot defend themselves. Meg participates in this theft without apparent guilt or hesitation. She has learned that taking advantage of weak people is acceptable behavior. She learned this from watching her father take advantage of her weakness for years. The pattern across all these episodes is consistent and clear. Every single time Meg gains power, confidence, beauty, authority, or advantage over someone else, she uses it to hurt people. She does not use newfound confidence to be kinder or to break the cycle of abuse. She uses it to become an abuser herself. When she is stronger than Peter, she beats and rapes him. When she has leverage over Chris, she blackmails him into criminal activity. When she is beautiful, she becomes entitled and mean. When she wants something from Joe, she commits felonies to get it. When she wants to please her crush, she plans to facilitate rape. This reveals a fundamental truth about what abuse did to Meg's personality. The years of cruelty from her family did not suppress a naturally good person who would be kind if only given the chance. The abuse taught Meg that the world operates according to a simple rule. Whoever has power uses it to hurt whoever is weak. Peter taught her this, Lois taught her this, Chris taught her this. Every person in her life demonstrated through their actions that cruelty is the natural response to having advantage over someone. Meg internalized this lesson so completely that she cannot imagine any other way to behave. When she is the victim, she accepts it because that is her role as the weak person. When she becomes strong, she immediately becomes the victimizer because that is what strong people do. She does not have a moral framework that says cruelty is wrong, regardless of who has power. She only has a framework that says the powerful hurt the weak, and your job is to be as powerful as possible so you can hurt others before they hurt you. This is the tragedy of Meg's character. The abuse did not just hurt her, it shaped her into someone who cannot break the cycle because she does not understand that any other cycle exists. She thinks this is how families work. She thinks this is how people work. When given the choice between using power for good or using it to hurt people, she chooses cruelty every single time because that is what she was taught. The abuse became part of her personality, not just something that happened to her. Meg is not a good person waiting to escape an abusive situation. She is someone the abuse transformed into another abuser, completing the cycle that will likely continue if she ever has children of her own. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.